Yeah.
We can.
Yeah.
We haven't.
Yeah, Oh, all right, never mind. Oh, it's on the other side.
They're actually on duty,
Okay,
so, yeah, no problem.
yeah.
Does anybody know how this thing pulls up?
I did it once. It's not easy. Figure it out.
So when we were there,
I don't know how they get them in.
yeah, we through the woods.
I think they're between.
I think it was.
Absolutely, absolutely, to be in touch, and we need to have it back there, and probably fundraising as well. Which is perhaps part of the actual meeting, so there's more people.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Yeah, and Bruce, your business card.
Hi, Ed. Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I just hand you can pass them out.
Board chair.
Oh, you're the chair.
The YMCA.
There's, thank you. There's seven up there and one for our attorney.
I saw that.
Hey, he doesn't give me a card. He just gives you a card.
Do you guys have Phyllis signature pages?
I do.
Oh, okay.
Sally, I want to make sure it doesn't get forgotten.
I included last week's list, which I forgot to have everybody sign.
I'd like help from this. To take now, we're going to do two. This is
Oh, the Christmas lights,
yes, I'll find
the
out.
holiday bill.
When we get to the bill list, you
Okay.
can just say you want that one pulled out.
We sign this anytime.
Anyone knock out the reassessment results? We have an extra.
He thought there might be an extra one, so.
Okay.
I can just stick it here now. I can hang on to
You moved the piano yourself?
Streaming, you just go to stream, waiting on the water. Are you ready?
Two guys, do you want?
Actually, I'm the driver.
Oh, okay, okay. I'll just stick it on the table here.
Other option.
She's great. She's a lifesaver. It took us all day.
But I'll keep whatever works for you then. Go ahead and let us know which one.
That we know that that's only for a professional.
Thank you for it.
Yeah.
I knew I was listening. Thank you.
Just reading for Chris.
I always forget to dress warmer. I'm always cold every meeting. No, it's all right. somebody else is up.
We're just waiting for Chris to rejoin us. Good evening, this is the February 24th, 2020 regular Borough Council meeting. This meeting is being held in conformance with the Open Public Meetings Act. We could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First up this evening, before we get into mayor's reports and public comments, and Sally, I see you put public comments before the reports.
I'm sorry, I forgot to change that. I changed it. We need to do the roll call.
Yeah, to the roll call, please, and then
Okay. Mayor Driver,
here.
Ms. Giles McCormick, Ms. Hand,
Here.
Mr. Harris,
Here.
Mr. Long,
Here.
Mr. Runyon,
Here.
Ms. Tilly.
Here.
Okay, if we could make a motion to move the public comments after the council members' reports.
So moved.
I'll second.
So,
Ms. Giles McCormick,
Yes.
Ms. Hand,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Long,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Ms. Tilly.
Yes.
okay, first up is our annual presentation on the state of the borough ratables by tax assessor Ed Kerwin. Let's try and with questions and all that. Ed, how long do you think you'll need?
20 minutes?
So let's try to keep it to like 30, 35 minutes with questions.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me this evening, Mayor and governing body members, I appreciate it.
And if you don't know who
You're
everyone
gonna
is.
probably need to use the microphone.
Yes,
Okay. Could I move it back so I don't turn my back on
Yeah.
someone?
Yep.
Thank you.
Wireless. Is it on?
You can just hold, yeah, it's on.
Okay. And raise it up too.
Thank you.
And you're recording.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, but you might.
I'm gonna raise it up. Okay.
There you go. It's shorter than me.
Very good. More people.
I sit here, here.
Again, thank you for having me. The handout that I've given everyone this evening is, the first page is a comparison of the 2020 versus 2019 assessments in the borough. For those that aren't familiar with it, we are an annual reassessing district. We change assessments every year based on the market conditions, as well as utilize the sales, multiple listing systems, the deeds, for commercial properties, the rents, the properties that are rented. So a lot of the information is all market driven, market data information that's used to adjust the assessments. There are classes of properties on this form. If you look at, it says vacant land, residential, commercial. We, as assessors, classify the code for vacant land as 1, residential is 2, commercial is broken into 3 categories, 4A, which is retail, 4B, which is warehouse type properties, and 4C are apartments. And next to that are the number of line items or the number of properties that we have in each category. Vacant land, we have 32. Residential, 854. Commercial, we have a total of 240 broken into the 3 categories. The retail, 4A at 228. The warehouse at 2, and the apartments at 10. And we have a total rateable items of 1126. What that means is we have 1,126 properties that pay taxes. The next column is the 2020 assessment, broken down, again down into categories. If we look from left to right, so you'll see that the 2020 vacant land is assessed at $2,141,100, and the 2019 land was at $2,336,600, and there was a decrease of $195,000. That decrease is a result of, there's a example would be over by the Weichert office at the Circle. They're building a 2-family home there. That was a piece of vacant land last year. Now it's it changes from a Class 1 and it goes to another category, which is Class 2. So that's why you see a decrease in that value, because the value switches over to a residential category. The residential total ratables that we have are 854. The 2020 assessment is $232,640,700. In 19, it was $228,741,600. We had an increase of $3,899,100 in residential values from 2019 to 2020. Now, keep in mind, this is a report that was done last year at this time, and then this is now an indication of how the market's changed a year later. So we had a 1.75% increase in the residential properties in town. The commercial properties, starting with the 4A, there's 228 of them. In 2020, our assessment is $170,495,500. It was $172,222,500. We lost $1,727,000 in commercial ratables from last year, which is approximately 1%, negative 1%. The warehouse type facilities, there's 2 of them, and they increased by $10,000, so we have about a 0.5% increase in those 2 properties for 2020. And the third one is Class 4Cs. The 4Cs are now assessed at $227,173,000, compared to last year was $226,497,300. We had I'm sorry, my apology. I'm reading the line below. The 4Cs are $54,822,500. Now it's last year it was $52,429,800. We had an increase of $2,392,700. It says 10 there, but we really have 7 or 6, I should say, large apartment buildings in town. One of them, Flemington Arms, is assessed as 2 lots, but if you combine them, we have 6 large complexes in town that was a result of the increase in value. That basically those properties went up at an average of about 4.8% 6%, compared to last year, which was a result of the desirability and the upward trend in the apartment complex market, not only in Flemington, but in New Jersey. If you look at the total ratables for commercial, it says total commercial. We basically, if you added up all those categories, we went up 0.3%, slight increase in the commercial ratable base overall. The last column, or last category, the total ratables, we had an increase of 4,379,300, and we were about just shy of 1% increase in the total ratables. What it's saying that our value in town increased by 4,379,300 from last year to this year. That's basically an idea of what the commercials are. I'll give you an example of what the 4 Bs are, saying warehouses. We have the Bemis property, the old Bemis property, which is now, I think it's Jaja Global, they call it. That is a warehouse type facility that we have in town. We have a second industrial warehouse or industrial type property, which is Mechanical Precision, which is off of Hopewell. Smaller ratable, but it's still, those are our 2 warehouse type facilities. So that kind of summarizes the ratables. If you turn to the next page, I put together a list of the top 10 taxpayers in town. The list, the names on the far left-hand side of the spreadsheet are the top 10 for 2020, for the year 2020. The first one is Flemington Apartments, better known as Prospect Hills. Their total assessed value is 19 million for this year, 284,800. The second one is the Shops of Flemington. It says Flemington South LLC, that's the Shops. They're at 17,706,000. The third one, Biltmore Realty, is Hunter Hills. It's approximately 180 apartments, and that's the apartments off of Garden Lane. It's Garden Lane, which is off of North Main. You also have Flemington Fidelco, which would be number 4. That is known as Flemington Arms, 112 apartments. The next one is Hunterdon Shopping Center. That's on Reville and 202. We have about that's 100,949 square foot shopping center. 71,673 square feet is in Flemington, and 29,276 is in Raritan. So that represents our portion of it, the assessment for the Hunterdon Shopping Center, which is 7,965,000. The next one is Rojo. That is on Church. It's the liquor store, the Hunterdon Health. I think there's a dermatology office there as well. It's that complex in there. It's Rojo. The next one is Hunterdon Muse, which we all know as Flemington Gardens, 60 apartments over there. Next one, Acromel, is Regional Court, which is another 60 apartments. The number 9 is Flemington Center Urban Renewal, which is the properties owned by the Mr. Cust's Investors. And the last one is J. Soms and Sons, which consists of the Desk Plaza, the Wendy's, and the Old Toy Kingdom, which is right next to the Wendy's. So those are our top 10 for 2020. Basically, on this chart, you can see the differences in the assessments from 2020 to 2019 if you read from left to right. What I thought was interesting was the amount of taxes they pay on the bottom, where it says 219. Now, I'm not able to determine what the 2020 taxes are because the tax rate will not be determined until sometime in probably June or July. We'll know the tax rate, which is what the governing body members will take care of. At that time, I can give you what the assessment would be. But right now, if you use the 2019, I estimated, did a rough estimate. Please don't hold me to this or the governing body. This is just a rough estimate that I came up with. The tax rate is $3.11, and there's also a 0.16 business improvement tax that's added to these commercials, monies that are used, the borough collects, and these monies go to the business improvement district, and they use it for purposes of advertising, etc., to help out the business properties. So I used a $3.14 tax rate. I added 3 cents to it. I added on the special business tax to each one of them. And basically, if you compare the 2019 taxes to the 2020, you'll see an increase of about $74,563.12, which is in the bottom right-hand corner from 19 to 2020. It just shows about what the top 10 taxpayers would be paying in 2020. The next page is a list of the things that we went over. It's the 2020 taxpayers. I printed it a little larger because the spreadsheet was difficult to read, so you can see the top 10 taxpayers that are on for 2020. The new one for 2020 is the Psalms property. That became number 10. If you turn to the last page, the property that came off the list was the Liberty Village. They're no longer on the top 10. They're probably more like 11 or 12. They've moved off that list for the year 2020. But it's interesting, we have, out of the top 10 for 2020, 5 of them are apartment complexes, 5 of the 10. So that was kind of interesting that the apartments keep appreciating in value and are continuing to be our highest ratables in town. Other than that, maybe I could answer some questions. Or...
I have a question.
Sure.
Joanne, let me take care of
Oh,
that
okay.
first, okay? Thank you. But we'll get to you, I promise. Are there any questions from council on any of this?
Mr. Kerwin, thank you. First off, thank you very much. I'm just looking at the estimates based on the top 10 and looking at 2019 to 2020.
Yes.
And I'm seeing a combination of both increases and decreases. What would cause expectations to go down for the coming year?
The increases on the apartments were basically due to the, you can see all the apartments were increased. The Flemington shop stayed about the same, that showed no increase. And the decrease was as a result of the properties that were purchased by Mr. Cuss Group or by the Flemington Urban Renewal Group. The prices were less than what I had them assessed for. And that's why the value had come down. If you added those all together, now this is before he owned it. In 2019, the assessments that I had on the books for the Flemington Fir and some of the other buildings that were purchased this year were much higher, or not much higher, but were higher than what they were purchased for. And that's where the adjustment came in as a negative adjustment.
Do purchase prices always drive down the assessment? I mean, because I could go and own a piece of property and, because I like Caitlin, and sell it to her at a rock bottom price. Would that then impact that assessment because we like each other, as opposed to the actual value of that property? Or the potential value of that property? That just seems, if we base it on sales price.
Well, it could. Your example is it's very, what I do is I try to research the sales to find out if there was something that was not normal in the marketplace, and that it maybe, in this particular case was were the buyers and sellers related, were they partners together in any kind of development. What I could find out from it, there was not they were arm's length transactions that were involved in it. I couldn't find anything. They're still higher than they're assessed higher than the sale prices that are there, but I had to bring them down to what I believe is a more defendable number. I didn't go right to the sale prices to answer your question.
Do you know offhand, and I'm sorry I didn't ask you for this, although I kind of obliquely did it in an email, but didn't come right out and ask, on properties that don't pay taxes, the not-for-profits, the county, are we still somewhere, I think it was 67 million last year? Are we still around? Is that number right or wrong? I don't remember.
I don't know if it sounds close to what it is, but I don't know what it is.
So there hasn't been any change though in that?
Not
There haven't
really,
been
no.
any properties coming off of nonprofit or going into nonprofit?
No, and if there was, insignificant. We had no, it wasn't any major changes at all.
Okay. And do the nonprofits have to submit a form every year that they're still fulfilling what their stated purposes that makes them?
Not every year, but it's called a further statement, and we send them out, and then they fill them out to let us know what the property is being used for, who's occupying it, because sometimes a nonprofit can own it and lease it to another nonprofit, so they have to tell us what the property is being used for. And those further statements have to be filed, not every year, they're usually filed every 3 to 4 years we receive those. So actually they're going out this year,
Okay,
in 2020.
great.
So we'll be sending one to all the exempt properties in town,
Okay. Including the county?
including the county. No one is exempt from that mailing. I did mention, but I didn't mention it, but I like to mention it because I don't want it to be a surprise. The commercial 4A properties, you see the $1,700,000 reduction in the 4A category. Liberty Village was in 2019 assessed at approximately $5.8 million. I worked with the group to try to settle. I knew they were going to appeal. I tried to work with them ahead of time to stop the appeal. The property was purchased for $2.7 million. I have it assessed now at $3.2 million. The property may have had some, I want to use the word may, have some environmental issues to it. But also a big impact on that property was this company comes in and buys these properties for cash. And what happens is the Liberty Village is approximately 49% vacant at this time, 51% occupied. And when somebody goes to look at the property to purchase it, they would have to go to a bank to finance it, like we finance our homes, and try to finance the property. And the problem is, which I learned this past year, is that most of the banks, most all the banks won't finance a property like this. One, because it's 49% vacant, and it has a history of vacancy. Number two, the tenants that are in there are short-term tenants. They're either month to month, or they have leases that are expiring. Previously to this, the Simon Group that occupied it would have, let's say, use an example, they own a shopping center in the Philadelphia area. What's that big shopping center?
King of Prussia?
King of Prussia, thank you very much, I appreciate that. So they have a tenant that comes into the King of Prussia that wants to have space in the King of Prussia. And what they did, the Simon Group would say, okay, we'll give you this space on the first floor in this location, but you're gonna have to open a storefront in the outlet center in Flemington. So they were able to keep some of the tenants there. When the property sold, the new group that bought it, doesn't have that leverage. So they now have to find tenants on their own, and they're not able to do what the Simon Group did. So I think what happened is the banks came along and said, we're not going to finance this because we don't have any solid leases here, 5 or 10 or 15-year leases. So it ended up going as a cash transaction. I asked them what they were going to be doing in the future. They really didn't know what they wanted to do at this point in time. Whether they're going to demolish the property and redevelop it, I don't know. Or they're going to try to do something else. I know they own a center in Powhatan, and they've demolishing part of that center and probably going to redevelop it. But at this point in time, I don't have any knowledge of what their intentions are for this property. So
We may have more clarity on that very soon, and I'll be talking about it.
Okay. You always know before me, so. So that's
Just call you
where-
up and say, send them the bill quick before they leave.
So our decrease in commercial ratables, when I reduced it from 5,832, that's why you see a negative 1.7 million in your ratable base of commercials. And we have one appeal that is pending. I tried to settle it. The Rite Aid, which is a vacant building. The attorney for the Rite Aid said he wasn't ready to try and settle the case or discuss it at this time. He noticed that I had lowered the assessment for 19 to what I believe was a defendable number, and at this point in time anyway, and he's going to get back to me in 2020 to discuss the one appeal that we have, which is the Rite Aid building. But other than that, we don't have any other litigation.
Any other questions from council?
So we have just under a 1% increase in the overall ratables. Last year it was a little over 1%, I believe. The year before that, I think it was right around that same number, 1.5, something like that. Can you give us a little bit more historic perspective? Understanding with what happened in 2008, we're on a trend that's averaging about a 1% a year at this point increase?
Yes, that's where we're kind of falling. The residentials are, as you can see, are picking up
Yes, they're at 50.4% of the ratables versus the commercial, which is 49.2%.
they're becoming a larger portion
Yes.
than they were so that they're carrying the
burden
burden
of the tax
for the
burden.
taxes.
Yes, on the residents. And do you know when that switch happened? That was a few years ago, where it was
It
more
started
residential?
happening probably, I'm just talking off the top of my head, maybe 7 or 8 years ago?
Okay.
8 years ago
So
more?
it's been,
It's been a while. It's progressively been changing because you know, it's been, we used to have really good years, you know, and when 25 years ago, we were just seeing 5% increases and large increases in the ratables, but now we're just going along at 1%. But, you know, it's, I'm not trying to say it's great, but it's better than a lot of towns. I've
It is.
noticed that a lot of towns, I was doing a study of towns that have these large homes in them, you know, the $1.5 million, $2 million, $3 million homes. And I've noticed that their rateable base is decreasing anywhere from 1.5 to about 3, almost 6%, depending on their commercial base, because and it's shifting from these large end homes that are, you know, that used to be selling at maybe 12 years ago, 14 years ago, people might have bought them for $3 million, and now they're selling them for, you know, $1.6 million, $1.7 million. You know, people losing $1.3 million so that is happening. Fortunately, we're not losing ratables. We're still.
And those are
keeping-
probably more likely more rural areas, whereas we have the center or a town, and we have the potential to have more commercial.
And we, yes,
And
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
really the way we will probably, hopefully see more of a substantial increase and substantial tax
yes, I think
relief
it's
for our
better chance
residents.
to gain value in the commercial than it is on those larger homes.
Absolutely.
There's absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Apart from the larger homes that you mentioned, like for our town with the large multifamily complexes, how does that factor in with the tax ratables coming in? I mean, part of how I understand this is with these large complexes, part of the tax revenues that come in are eaten up by the cost of the infrastructure to keep up, build, and maintain them. So what is the fact? I mean, if we're looking to increase our tax ratables, is it better to facilitate multifamily residential or commercial?
Both. Actually, both. They go hand in hand because you have to have both in order for people to have, you know, the people that are going to move here want places to eat. They want places to shop. They want places to, you know, they want to walk downtown, using Flemington as an example, to walk downtown to be able to, you know, buy something or go out on a spring day or summer day, you know, if they have children, stroll downtown, you know, so you really need both. You need both the you know, the housing and the commercial. They need to go together.
Certainly, it's like an ecosystem.
So,
What's the minimum number of apartments for it to be listed under a 4C?
how many apartments?
Like within the complex? Like is the one at the end of Broad Street, is that 4C? Even though it's a smaller complex?
Okay,
I'm not sure what it is.
That's
Madison Arms?
Madison Arms,
That-
yes.
that
That's
is-
not, that's the smallest of, that's the,
Okay.
but yes, so we have,
Like is it, do they say it has to be a minimum of 50 apartments to classify as a 4C, or is it just more than 6?
more than 4.
More than 4?
We have Prospect Hills, Hunter Hills, Flemington Arms, Flemington Gardens, Regional Court, and Madison Arms are the 6 large ones that we have. Then we have a 4-family on Pennsylvania Avenue. We have a 4-family on Elwood. And on Grant, we have 2 houses and a 4-family on 1 property. That's what makes up the other 3. But we're really only, and Madison Arms has 2 lots, that's why it says 10. So really so we really only have 6, and those assessments are small compared to the ones I mentioned on Pennsylvania and Elwood, compared to our 6 large apartments in town. And out of that 6, 5 of them are our top 10 taxpayers.
Thank you.
So,
Anyone else up here? Ms. Braun?
Okay. Joanne Braun, 77 Jefferson Court, Flemington. My question was, this Flemington Apartments LLC, is that Flemington Arms? On the top 10 taxpayers?
Prospect Hills.
Well, I mean, the top one is, this one here
Yeah,
is Prospect Hills.
Prospect
That has
Hills.
164 units.
Okay, so which one is Flemington Arms?
Flemington Arms is number 4, which is Flemington Fidelka.
Okay, gotcha.
But you said Prospect Hills has 164?
164. How do they come up with, how do you do the, is it like a formula to come up with this 600,000? Fine.
Yes, what it is I take the rent that's in the building and, or for each of the apartments, and I add it up and the total rent, and then I subtract the vacancy factor, which the court systems look at, typically vacancy factors can range anywhere from 5 to 15% on apartments, depending on how well they're managed. The typical appraisals that you look at are 10% negative adjustment for vacancy, and it also includes collection factors as well. And then after that, I subtract the expenses, the heat, electric, maintenance, supers, salary, the replacement items in the building, anything that needs, all the expenses I subtract those, and then I use a capitalization rate, which includes the taxes, because the landlord pays the taxes, not the tenants, and then I come up with a value for each one. And each one has, different rents. Like Madison Arms is a nice, you mentioned in Madison Arms, the landlord there is that I've seen anyway, seems to be pretty nice to his tenants. He doesn't push his rents too much compared to some of the others because he's trying to keep some stability in the building, and he likes the tenants that are there, and he wants to keep them because I guess for him, they maintain the building and he doesn't have a high maintenance factors on it. So everyone's a little different. Some landlords look for the most money, but then they end up having high expenses because of some, you always get the
Because the rents are higher, so then the taxes are gonna go up.
and the taxes go up too, yes.
Joanne, I just wanted to clarify your question. You asked how he came up with the 601,000, the tax figure for
Basi-
2019 for Flemington Arms?
Yeah.
Is that what you asked?
I'm sorry.
No, it's
You were right.
it's Prospect Hills. I didn't know which one was Flemington Arms.
Well,
It's-
I'm sorry, Flemington Apartments LLC.
Yeah, that's Prospect Hills.
It's this number here, the assessed value for 2020,
Yeah.
okay? Well, this was the 19, so it's the 2019 assessment times the tax rate, which was $3.11 plus 16.4 cents of the business tax added together, multiplied by this value to give you the taxes. So how you calculate taxes is you take the assessed value, simply divide it by 100, and multiply it by the tax rate. The residential properties tax rate in 19 was 311, so you would take, $100,000 divided by 100 times 311, you get $111 per 100,000. So that's how the taxes are done, to calculate. I'm sorry, I didn't answer her question, so thank you. They're based on the assessment times the tax rate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cornelison.
A couple of quick questions. Charitable property.
Name and
Yeah.
identify.
Rich Cornelison, 134 Main Street. For charitable properties, those are churches, number one. In terms of house-type buildings that have tenants, does one or more charitable tenants qualify for a charitable property?
Okay.
That's,
You say one or more tenants that are in a building, will they qualify? Yes.
and if the owner is not a charity, but if there's one or two tenants in a
No,
commercial.
if the owner's not a charity, then it's taxable.
Okay, good, I just wanted to clarify that.
Because it has to be owned by a nonprofit. Now, even if the nonprofit rents it out to a individual,
Right,
then it's taxable.
Okay.
But a nonprofit can also rent out to another, to another nonprofit.
So the owner has to be a charity to qualify for the Sherrville property
That's correct.
qualification. Second thing, do historical buildings or age of buildings or ones that have been qualified for historical, registered and so forth, are they assessed any differently than non-historical properties?
I don't mean to be vague, it depends on what type of a historical property is. If it's a home, then it's, you know, I look at it like a dwelling. If it's more of a commercial type use, then I look at it more like a commercial type use, you
Okay,
know.
but no really factor for being historical or not?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lois?
Yes, so the decrease in the
Lois?
Lois
Name.
Stewart, Leamington. The 4C, where we had the, no, 4C.
Or A?
Lois,
You're
you have to
gonna
speak
need
up.
to use the
Either you have to get up to the
microphone.
microphone or stand up or something.
Well, I have to figure out what I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I mean, you have to talk to the microphone.
The decrease, I don't need.
Yeah, you do. It's hard to hear you, I'm sorry.
The decrease in the commercial is primarily as a result of the reassessment of Liberty Village, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm wondering though, we had several new properties built in this town in the last year. You mentioned one on South Main Street. There's one over in the Manor. How has that affected? I mean, what kind of increase did we get from newly built properties in town?
Well, it would be assessed at, you know, the market value. I couldn't tell you what I couldn't answer your question by saying how much did it increase the rateable base. I'd have to go back and look what each one was.
Do you know how many actual new residential properties we increased by?
Maybe three or four? Three?
Well,
Three, I think.
It
I
has
think
it
it
on
was
the,
three.
it has a class 2 residential properties. 2019 was 851, 2020 is 854.
I'm not
On the
talking,
bottom of that sheet.
I wasn't
Two
talking,
bottom graphs.
I wasn't talking about, I was talking about resident, okay, so it went up 3. I said, thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
Did we lose any taxable properties this year? I mean, the cut glass, when they ripped that down, we lost taxable buildings. But did we lose any taxable properties
No, because I
this year?
cut glass, I raised the land value.
Yes, but I'm saying, were there any other properties that we lost in the town this past year in 2019? I was trying to think about if we actually lost any ratables.
No, not, I mean, the group that bought the house, but that was small. Didn't lose any ratables.
Did United Way buy that property on Fulberg?
Yes.
I think that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2018.
There was another one though that what was that? They paid like 300, almost 300,000 for it. I can't remember.
And how
What's the name of that?
how are substantial renovations handled? Like on the corner of Elwood and whatever that other street is. Maple, yes. That house is undergoing substantial, I mean really substantial renovations.
Right.
So you assessed it at the end of 19 for this year, correct?
Right.
So when will those renovations be shown on the assessed?
The renovations will be shown basically when the property owners receive the certificate of approval from the building department. They have to come in and take out permits to do a renovation.
Yes, I
And-
assume they
and-
have those
and-
permits
and-
already because they're well underway there.
And Jeff Klein will issue a certificate of approval, and when he does, I'll receive a copy of that, and then then I will go out and take a look at it and assess that. And it could, I'm not sure what month that would be this year, but I'm assuming it would go on either as an added assessment for this year, or it would go on at full value for 2021 if it doesn't.
So you can change the assessment in the course of one tax year.
Yes.
I see, thank you.
So if they receive a certificate of approval in June 5th.
Is that the same as an occupancy permit?
Yeah, it's like an occupancy permit. Then I will assess it, and they'll pay taxes commencing the first day of the following month, which would be July 1 to the end of the year, on those improvements that would be added to their existing assessment, their taxes.
But that property owner is entitled to come in and ask for relief on that as well. I mean, I think we approved one last year.
Yes.
For a property owner, for a homeowner who did some significant renovations and asked for relief, but that's like 5 years or something, or it's phased in.
Yes, they can have.
That's a good point. How many properties do we have now that are on that plan where you have 5 years to get your full assessment after you've done renovations?
I think 6. We have, I can't remember them off the top of my head.
6 residential or 6 total?
6 we have 1 residential, Marcia, Mrs. Caro home. We have her kitchen and renovation. We have, the rest are all commercials, which are, there's $300,000 left on feed mill.
How about the place on Mine Street?
That came off this year. The Bluefish Grill and that complex.
No, I didn't mean that one. I meant the office building that used to be a billion years ago, the Slack Rack.
Well, that came off a couple years ago.
Oh, that's finished. There's no.
Yes, that's off that came off like 2 years ago. We have the Chimney Rock Inn. We have the doctor's office on North Main.
The dermatologist.
Dermatologist. What else do we have?
So we have 5 commercial and 1 residential that
Right.
are on that plan
Right.
of abated taxes for 5 years.
And they equate, I know, I just read about a week ago, so I was looking at, I think the total of those equate to about 3.7 million. That is, and I was looking to see when they expire. 4 of the 6 are going to expire at the end of 2021, and we'll only have 2 left on there, after that, which is.
Well, I hope we have more, because that's investment in our community.
It's a good incentive for them.
So they come on and off, I got a call from somebody 2 days ago that wants to talk to me about something he wants to do on Mine Street. So probably looking to get into the abatement program for whatever he's doing. But yes, we have 6
5 commercial.
5 commercial, 1 residential.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Robin Lapidus, Flemington Community Partnership.
And,
I'll get it.
I'm gonna take.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
I appreciate that.
I'm gonna speak to her. if you want.
Okay. So my question is the definition of vacant land. Would you mind just clarifying what those properties are?
And where are they?
Is that's cut glass and
Vacant land.
Agway?
Well, yeah, Flemington Cut Glass. Going back to Liberty Village, they have vacant land that they own in Liberty Village, small individual lots and parcels of land that they own that's considered Class 1. Even if it's used as a parking lot, it's still vacant land because it doesn't really have an improvement on it. And then just individual lots that the land that people own in town. It's just somebody that doesn't have a building on it, a structure,
So that could be residential or
commercial,
commercial.
yes.
And parking, that was my question really, is how is parking assessed? Like the Liberty Village parking lots that are so valuable, are they assessed they're assessed as,
A commercial land value.
okay,
So it's still vacant land, but it's done as a commercial land value for the complex. So the land value for that vacant lot is the same value per acre as the land that has the building on it, but it's two different classes. One is a 4A, because there's a building on, the other is a class 1, because it's vacant land. And whether it's used as a parking lot or just sits there as vacant, it's still assessed the same. Unless there's something unusual about the land that they're not using, let's say it's floodplain, and then it would be assessed at something lower.
and that leads to my other question, which is about the value or the quality of the inventory, because we know there's a lot of vacant commercial that would be very hard to rent because of the condition that it's in. And, so you take that factor into your assessment.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. One more?
Yeah, I just
Hold
wanted
on,
to ask,
get the microphone. Yeah.
Lois Stewart, Flemington, I just wanted to ask, is this 1.70% change that you show on this for residential, is that the average increase in each property in the
Right.
borough?
For each home, correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kerwin, thanks for your annual appearance.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, you might leave it on, because we'll be doing comments, we're going into comments at some point.
I'll turn it right back on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can you actually, Sally, point it towards, so if anyone gets up there, or they can go to there now. I kind of like it in the center. Good? Yeah, that should be fine. Thank you. So moving on will be mayor and council reports. Do we move the thing? This morning, the New Jersey Court of Appeals issued a ruling on the plaintiff's challenge, that would be the Friends of Historic Flemington, challenge of the New Jersey DEP SHPO approval to sell the borough-owned buildings at 90-100 Main Street and the associated parking lots. The court upheld the decision of SHPO to permit the buildings to be sold, with the mitigating conditions attached to it. Just for clarity, there are still mitigating conditions for the developer to meet before you can actually purchase that building, and that's in alignment with the purchase agreement. And so those conditions still have to be met before the borough can sell that. On the 12th, I met with the representative of the governor's office here at Borough Hall. We discussed several items of concern, including school funding, the potential reclassifications of the South Branch of the Raritan River to Category 1, infrastructure funding, most importantly, and state aid associated with infrastructure funding and municipal aid as well. I'm hopeful that my comments were taken to heart. I believe they were, and I'll be joining the governor on a conference call for mayors when they talk about the budget, and that's coming up later this week. That same day, the redevelopment committee for the Global Ag property met with our redevelopment attorney. We are beginning the process of putting together a redevelopment agreement with Captiva Main Street. That's on the Global Ag side of the property. Just as a reminder, March 25th. The other side, the Nilkanth developer who has control of that property, will be at the historic courthouse to present their concept plans. That'll be 7 p.m. on March 25th. I attended the Safe Harbor community meeting held at the Baptist Church that same day, the 12th. It was a busy day. I talked about the spike in youth suicides we're seeing here in our community, and other communities as well are seeing this as well. It was good to see our youth so engaged on this community emergency. It was sad to hear that they don't feel that they're being listened to.
I think we as a community really need to stop and listen to what our students are telling us. And we need to take their advice on what we can do. They should be leading this to a certain extent in collaboration with the schools, as well as community leaders to stem this ongoing and growing tragedy of youth suicide in our community. On the 13th, I attended the New Jersey Conference of Mayors Winter Summit in Trenton. The main topic was how to embrace technology in municipal operations, and as much as I sometimes think we're a little bit still last century, I was happy to learn that while we do have plenty of room for improvement, we are far ahead of what other towns of comparable size and budget are at right now. Water meters is a great example. A lot of places don't even have that same water metering technology that we have. The property at 144 Main Street received bids from 2 prospective purchasers. The high bid came in at $220,000 late Friday afternoon. So those bids are now in the hands of the DEP to accept one of them. I talked with Tara, our borough attorney, earlier to send, and if she has them, if not, I can send them what the purchase of proposals were and what they want to do. Basically, they're both restaurants. And one was for $215 and one was for $220. They came in at like $190 and $200 originally, and they got into a little bit of a bidding war. And so we did put a deadline on it as to last Friday afternoon so that we could move that process forward. I met with the Chamber of Commerce Governance Committee last week for a briefing on where redevelopment in the borough stands right now, and we'll be talking a little bit about that later on. There is some movement around Liberty Village, which I'll speak about. There's a resolution on the agenda this evening authorizing the creation of a committee to look at future redevelopment at that site. And when we get there, I'll mention the very brief conversations I've had with them. They did call me kind of out of the blue. When they first bought, I reached out to them to no effect and no return phone calls, but they finally called back, and so hopefully something will be happening there. And they seem to be engaged, which is really good. Let's start with Kim today.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna take the advice of Mr. Shore and keep my reports going forward a little more condensed. So just know that on the second Wednesday of every month, there's a DPW meeting that I attend. On the 13th of February, we had the bid opening for the library interior renovation project. We have received a recommendation letter from the architect, and the bid is actually currently under review with the borough engineer and the borough attorney. We have 60 days from bid opening to award that contract, so we are in that process. And on the 29th, I had an HPC meeting. We had one application, 6 Park Avenue, which is the Catholic Charities building. They will be renovating their handicap ramp. And that's it.
Okay. Jess?
Yes. So on Saturday, Councilman Long and I went to the New Jersey League of Municipalities to learn about budgeting and different ways that we can help the borough. It was very informative. This week I am going to the American Pets Alive conference. It's about pets and local ordinances and government sessions. So I hope to bring some information back and work with Councilman Harris regarding that. So, and that's all I have.
Councilman Harris.
Environmental Committee did not meet. We have Shade Tree Committee meeting that will be on Wednesday. I'm meeting with DIY tomorrow together with Star Thrower Group at their request. And that's what I'm reporting this evening. Thank you.
Caitlin.
Probably not going to be as expedient. I apologize. The Salem Fleming House Museum and Gardens does have their Irish soda bread and homemade butter event coming up in celebration of St. Patty's Day and in the spirit of honoring Salem Fleming's Irish heritage on March 14th from 1 to 4 p.m. It's always a great event and I encourage everyone to attend. On the agenda tonight in the consent agenda is the execution of the Opportunity Zone Challenge program, so we'll actually be able to start spending that money that we received in order to have charrettes and other community building and talking about how we want Flemington to grow and be what we want the community to be. So I'm excited about that process getting a little bit farther along there. The FCP, you can look for more details on Restaurant Week, which is going to be March 8th through the 13th. Special fixed pricing from $25 to $35. More restaurants should be joining on, so look for that as we get closer. There is a stakeholders meeting this Wednesday that is sold out at the Chimney Rock that will be talking about economic development. They have released a calendar of events for the year. It's received a lot of good press promotion. They still have even more events that are listed on their calendar on their website, so I encourage everybody to check all of those things out. The streetscape lampposts, as part of the streetscape revitalization, the streetscape project, I apparently can't say that word very well. The lampposts that were included in that project did come with posts for banners. So the FCP is working on getting new banners for that to attract and brighten up Main Street as well. And they are also looking at the filling station since the bids have been received for the current location of the filling station. They're looking at continuing that event in the summertime into the fall and other locations around town. So that is also under development. That's it for me.
Thank you. Chris?
Environmental Commission has a meeting March 16th, 7 o'clock here. We have a meeting set up, or I have a meeting set up this week with the mayor, myself, borough engineer Mike Campion, regarding the possibility of moving to LED lighting for our parking lots and streets. And that's all I have for environmental. On a slightly separate note, I consider myself up here a man of few words, but when there are words that need to be spoken, I speak them. And I have a number of words tonight regarding the second reading of the ordinance for 2021. That prior to being moved to a vote, I would appreciate if I had some time to share those with council. And that's all I have.
You will. Jeremy?
Hello, good evening. I don't have a ton to share other than March 2nd we'll have another planning board meeting. As Councilwoman Hand had mentioned, we attended a budget informative session put on by the League Municipalities. Very educational, fascinating. Just kind of being in the middle of listening to the budget items and hearing the different departments talk to us. It was illuminating and just I feel a lot more confident moving forward, learning about all this stuff. Other than that, I don't have much to say that other than on Saturday, if you want to talk to me, I try to keep a block of time open. So from 9 to 10, I'll be out at the Flemington Coffee Shop. So for about an hour. So I've been trying to do that. I want to make sure that I'm doing this job the best I can, and I'm all about getting as many perspectives as possible. So that's going on Saturday. Thanks.
Thank you. So the planning board meeting for tomorrow is canceled?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Due to a lack of business. Before we move on, during the work session this evening, we had Bruce Black from the YMCA here talking about the Flemington Yorkton Community Pool, which they are opening in summer of 2020. They're moving ahead. Jeff Kane, who's sitting in the back, Jeff Kane is also the newest Flemington Yorkton School Board member. I understand he was sworn in this evening. Congratulations and thank you for stepping up to what is often a thankless job, perhaps even more than this one up here can be at times. Also, I just want to thank Jeff Kane, who was really the driving force to get the YMCA on board with reaching out to the YMCA and worked very, very hard and diligently over the past more than a year, I think, or about a year, to get the Y on board to take over the pool so it could again be open to for swimming in our community, and I'd like to thank you for doing that. It's really appreciated. That brings us to our first public comment session. We do require you to come up to the microphone now to speak because it's recorded. We do have, if you haven't been here in a while, the speakers are working and perhaps you can hear us even better. That was at the request of Ms. Stewart, and we appreciated getting nudged into that direction to make it happen for those who may have some hearing impairments. And we also have, for those who don't know, we have the loop as well, if you would like to. I do this because that's the only way I know how to describe it, the loop if you have a hearing.
They have earphones, so you can like, and there's also, if you have hearing aids.
Yep, so many ways to be heard, but we do require you as a result to come up to the microphone and speak now when you want to.
Do I have to give my credit card if I want to use those?
Yes. Yeah, no, you have to leave us your car keys, that way you can't leave with that. We trust you, Lois, we know where you live. And that's it. So first up is 3 minutes. As always, you get one opportunity to speak, and then we'll move in and we do have a second public comment session. Sir? If you could state your name and where you live? Great.
Take your time.
Right here, right here.
It'll pick up.
You're good, you're good, yeah.
You're good.
Okay. My name is Zach Ruste I am from 1 Meadowbrook Road, Flemington, New Jersey, and I am with the Star Thrower Group.
It's good. You're good. Don't worry about it. You're okay.
You're okay.
He can project.
And I would like to take a few moments to say thank you. Our group was founded in July 2018 by Jenny Clark. And we were founded to provide a safe place for young adults in our community to practice adulting. Members join our organization to participate in social activities, work on community service projects like with Flemington Partnership. And there are courses and discussions to improve skills and provide pre-vocational training and continuing education opportunities for fitness and nutrition, service, career, computer skills, language, and literacy, music, dance, and creative arts. The best part about our organization is that it connects us to town. We can hang out with friends, walk to the library, head down for a slice of Jack's, or sit at the counter and hang out drinking milkshakes at Shaker's Cafe. Without this place to gather, we would be stuck home alone. I get a ride to Star Throws, and from there I can have the freedom to get where I want. We sign in and out, so the staff knows who's in the building in case of an emergency. But we are free to shop, eat, walk around town, anything any other adult in the community can do. If I didn't have the Star Throwers group, I would be stuck at home, alone. Jenny's primary goal forming this organization was to connect young adults so they get involved in the community. Too many graduates are sitting home alone, passing the time with social media, video games, and binge watching TV. This isolation leads to depression and loneliness. Star Thrower Group is a wonderful community center where people can come together and share interests and be part of something bigger than themselves. We invite friends to join us for Wednesday walks with weather permitting, and it was fun creating our haunted house and parade celebrations with the borough. We have enjoyed our time helping the Flemington DIY, Flemington Community Partnership, Chamber, and Borough, as well as the many businesses and organizations along Main Street, and look forward to more good times in our community. We are thankful for being able to spend time in community buildings like DIY and the library, and for the friendships we have made in Flemington. We thank our police and firefighters for keeping us safe, and the public works around Flemington and Flemington Partnership for making our town walkable and beautiful. Thank you.
Zach, I have a question. What time are the Wednesday walks at?
Wednesday walks are around like 10 in the morning.
Thank you.
It's a mile from down the street all the way back, so you clocked it.
Excellent, thank you. I'll try and join you one of these
Maybe Miss
Wednesdays.
Betsy would like to come to the gym, and you bring your gym clothes on Wednesday, and you can go to Planet Fitness too.
Okay. Thank you. Next,
That was very good.
Jeff.
Jeff King, 54 Broad Street. First, thank you, Mayor Driver, for your overly kind words. Sorry, Council, I was unable to be here for Mr. Black's presentation earlier. I am obviously very much a supporter of the Flemington Raritan Community Pool, having served on its board for almost 2 years now. And I am somewhat shocked and absolutely elated that we are on track to have the pool open again. My initial estimation of the likelihood of success when I got started was at about 5%. And now we're looking at swimming about 3 months from now, which I think is a phenomenal thing to do for the community, to be able to get that open for all the children especially, but for anyone in the surrounding area. I would ask that if we can find any ways to support the Y and its endeavors, that we really look hard at doing those, whether it's with funds from the community, the municipality, or in-kind support. I have all of the correspondence that still exists for the community pool dating back to the 60s, and I have letters typewritten from the pool to the Borough of Flemington and Raritan Township asking for money because the pool was insolvent 50 years ago. So this has always been something that's been getting by on a shoestring, but obviously as recently as 6 years or 10 years ago, there were 450 family members of the pool. So I personally have experienced it being really a great place to relax, let kids play freely in a safe environment, and I'm really optimistic that we'll be able to do so again for the next 50 years under the Y's direction. So I'm sorry I couldn't be here earlier when Bruce and Dr. Cedarbaum spoke, but I'm really thankful that we're on this track. I'm knocking wood that we get this to fruition in May, and thankful for all your future support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lois?
Yes. Lois Stewart, Flemington. I have several things that I wanted to ask about. First of all, I was absolutely horrified when I noticed that the trees in front of the former Fridays have been chopped terribly.
Lois, can you go towards the mic more?
That is the worst thing that can happen to trees, and I just don't know who in this borough let the new owners, whoever that is, cut those trees that way. Just go over and look at them. It's terrible, and I hope that the Environmental Commission, the Shade Tree Commission, someone will find some recourse to that. If they have to replace the trees, so be it. It is a disgrace as what has happened to those trees. And the practice of topping trees is just not acceptable in the arbor community. So I hope somebody will take care of that. The next thing I wanted to raise was, as we talk about redevelopment and our opportunity zone, people who are coming to look at this community, I thought that I should share this with you. A recent survey, and this is from the Bucks County Herald, a recent survey from Improvement by CraftJack found that living in close proximity to a grocery store is the top priority for nearly 90% of Americans when describing their ideal neighborhood. Park space, a strong public school system, fine dining restaurants, and fast casual restaurants were other important features to have close by to the majority of consumers surveyed. Places of worship, a theater, a large shopping mall, and a music venue were all low on the list of must-haves for a dream neighborhood, according to the respondents. So I would give this to the mayor. So.
Oh, careful. She's okay.
As long as I don't break the equipment.
Thank you. Well, I'm not concerned about the equipment, I'm more concerned, don't break
So
yourself.
that was, then I understand that we have, I was gonna ask about the old Highline property, but I understand that you've gotten bids on that and they're being reviewed. And they're for restaurants, is that correct? Okay, thank you. I really have to be honest, I'm very disappointed in the Main Street project. I guess it's finished now. And I just went up there and I stood there about in front of the still wrapped up kiosk, and I don't know when the blanket's gonna come down off the front of that. But I stood there and I looked to the right, I looked to the left, and I could not see $1 million in improvements. It was really sad that $1 million has been spent with so little obvious improvement. I mean, we have a few more benches, we still have concrete, except now the concrete has lines in it. We have different, the one thing I do like is the new street signs, they seem to be a little more visible. But we still have the big street lights with the other new street lights underneath. We have smaller trees instead of the bigger trees. So I just am really disappointed. And even though we got the grant from someplace, it's still money out of my pocket and your pocket. And to spend $1 million, I think it was actually more than $1 million,
Was?
to get that result,
Thank you.
I just think it's really unfortunate. Is my time up?
Yeah, so the kiosk will be put back once the state does its inspection. We don't want to attach it to the sidewalk, because the state has to do their inspection before the stuff gets paid and reimbursed and all that. They have to come in the DOT.
What's the red tape?
Red tape, yeah, bureaucracy. Ms. Bruns?
Okay, Joanne Braun, 77 Jefferson Court, Flemington. A cut glass came up tonight, and I was wondering if you can tell me anything that's happening with that property, or how, I know they've been given extension after extension. Are the extensions up
They are this year,
this year, meaning
2020.
2020? So they can't apply for another extension in 2020?
It would be up to the planning board to grant. They're not entitled, they're not automatically entitled to one like they have been in the
An
past.
extension for a use variance, or?
It was for use, yeah, for the approvals. I mean,
Yeah.
the planning board, I believe, can give them one if they so choose, but the entitled extensions is up this year.
Okay, so what would happen if they don't give them the extension?
You'd have to go through the process again.
Okay, it's like present a new plan, develop whatever he wants to do with it. Okay, well, that would be good, because then he'd be forced to come up with something, to do something with that property. It's been, what, 7 years?
Something like that.
7 years. They've hurried up and knocked the whole thing down, and now it's weeds. I think that was it. That was it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Shore?
Good evening, neighbors, council members. A couple of questions I have today are with these. First of all, I just want to bring it to your attention. This is very important. There's a road easement that runs over 206 into the back of Somerville. And it is in the interest of this community to maintain that easement. And I think we need to get a hold of the freeholders down in Somerville and the Somerville Planning Board, Board of Adjustment, and all the other powers that be down there, and do whatever you can to preserve that easement. And the reason for preserving it is because if we ever want trains in Flemington connected to New York City, that easement has to survive the development. Somebody should get on that. The budget meetings, are those done yet?
No.
How many
There's
more?
one more with more departments coming in Thursday, and then we have scheduled kind of a wrap-up where council will sit down and start nitpicking and sharpening their pencils.
Okay, I was looking for the recordings, but I didn't see any. Are they recorded or not?
No.
All right, I hope the budget's going down.
I'm trying.
Shared services.
Yes.
Last, I think it was November, it came up. It's quite contentious in this room over this. You were to send a letter down to DCA authorizing the study for the shared services. Was that done?
No, I never sent a letter, I never received the address. Mr.
Well,
Harris was supposed to
This
send me
council
that.
passed a resolution last year, I believe it was in March. I could stand corrected there, but my memory doesn't serve me if it wasn't March, to get that study done. And at the last minute in that meeting in November, again, not sure if it was November or October, it came up that there was a letter that was required, although that never was requested in the packet originally. And I believe this council needed you to send that letter down there. And I'm just questioning why it was never sent. The fact that you don't have an address.
Well, I fulfilled what the resolution asked for.
Well, has the application?
They've never contacted me, Mr. Shore. I mean, I would think that if they need something from me, the state would contact me. They know how to get a hold of me. I had a representative from the governor's office sitting in here the other day.
There was an email about this whole thing, what was needed, and I understood, it came up at that meeting.
I never saw an email. You'll have
So,
to, maybe.
Point of
Mr.
clarification,
send
at the end of the
that
meeting.
back.
Please don't at this point, because I have, well, my time's up.
Yeah, I provided the
If you
contact
can answer the
information.
questions about
Sure.
these and other things, I appreciate it.
Anyone else? Robin?
Thank you.
I just wanted a point of clarification. Our lovely liaison said that our event was sold out, and I just wanted to say, our state, it's okay.
It's not because there's no
I
tickets
said
that were.
at capacity because it's a free event for the stakeholders, so, but we have a limited capacity and we're at that capacity. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken? Okay, moving on, that will bring us to the approval of the minutes. We have a motion to approve the February 9th special council meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Ms. Driver? Or, I'm sorry, Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
February 9th, that's the Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll abstain from that.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Steve?
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Next up is approve the minutes of the February 9th special meeting of the executive session. That was also that Sunday event.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Abstain.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Abstain.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
That brings us to the consent agenda. There are 3 items on there.
No, there's one more.
Oh, there's one more. Oh, goodness, thank you. Approve the motion to approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2020 regular council meeting.
I'll move it.
3 of them in
Second.
one. Fell smoothly.
Okay, Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Now that brings us to the consent agenda. There are 3 items on there. One of them is the Opportunity Zone Challenge. One is the annual submission of the recycling tonnage grant, as well as signing some documents for the DEP for the selling of the
Something to bring out. And first, it's a point of clarification. You've rushed from the close following your statement to Mr. Short that I've not provided an address.
I'm
As
sorry,
the
we're gonna,
minutes-
can we?
No, no,
this
No,
is
no.
not.
We're doing the consent agenda
We're doing the
now.
consent
That's
agenda.
fine.
You're out of order.
You've rushed through. I'm making
I'm
a
sorry,
point of
Michael.
clarification.
I'm gonna ask you to defer your
Please
discussion.
don't all speak at the same time because it's hard for us to know what the heck is going on.
Mr. Harris is out of order.
I'll ask the council to advise.
Yeah, right now there's a motion on the floor for the consent agenda. So yeah, right now it's not the appropriate time.
So following this?
Following it, if you want to add something to the
I
agenda.
will, thank you.
Let us know.
Thank you very much.
Did we have a second on the consent agenda? Sorry.
I missed who made the motion, there was a little, Kim?
Kim.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
And who made the second? Chris, okay. So we voting on the consent agenda now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda's been approved.
Okay, does anyone want to add anything to the agenda at this time? I guess, I don't know how this was brought up. It was brought up under public comments. So I guess
There's a second public comment session.
there's organization-wise. Do we just want to bring it up again when we get to public comments?
Sure.
I'm fine with
Okay.
it. And you've asked about adding to the agenda?
I say add to the agenda.
Did you
It was
want to
something brought
amend
up
the
in public
agenda?
comment.
Sure.
You want to amend the
Yeah,
agenda?
let's just
Right.
wait till the end, just for organization purposes, and we don't drive Sally too crazy.
Certainly, thank you.
So first up is ordinance 2020-1. This is a second reading and it's a public hearing. This is to eliminate the option of appealing the grant of a D variance to the governing body and amending Chapter 14 entitled Planning Board and Historic Preservation Commission of the General Ordinances of the Borough of Flemington, County of Huntington, State of New Jersey. If we could have a motion
I'll move
to
it.
open the public hearing.
Oh, well, yeah.
Second for discussion?
Public hearing.
Well, it's a public hearing first.
Yeah, I would say just to, because I know Mr.
Yes.
Councilman Runyon brought this up, what I would recommend is opening it for the public hearing, letting the public talk
Yes.
about it, and then council remarks when you do the motion to adopt it, then do it, because it also gives you the benefit of when you discuss it amongst yourselves, you've heard any public comments, so if that can add to your comments.
Before we make that motion, just another question for you.
We've already have a motion on the
Right,
floor to
I moved
open the
it.
public hearing and it's been seconded.
I should not ask the
Is
council
there,
a question.
is it a question about making motion for the public hearing?
It is a motion, it's a question regarding the public hearing. It has nothing to do with that motion. We can proceed with that at some point before we open the public hearing, which is what I expect this to be. I'll ask my question. Thank you.
We're just opening it for public
You
hearing.
open the
we're
public
not,
hearing.
It's not to adopt the ordinance.
Not to
yet.
adopt.
Oh, I understand that quite well. And when you feel it's the right time, before we
Is it about
close,
the ordinance?
absolutely.
Oh, yeah, if it's council remarks, I say after we close the public portion, we make make a motion to adopt.
So what I will
and
bring
then
to your
discuss.
attention is that what we've done last year, quite successfully, was that rather than closing the public session of the comments, we allowed council to make statements at that time. So that way, the residents, those who are in attendance, could ask us questions as well. If we were just to go into public comment, and close public comment, and not to give them another opportunity to speak, and then for us to speak, it's very likely, and it has been proven previously, that there are questions generated by our statements. Previously, and this was in the minutes, from actually when this ordinance was adopted, that by hearing the council statement, that generated questions from the community. And in the interest of openness, I would just ask that we not move to quickly close the public comment and rather have our open discussion so that we may have a dialogue with those who are interested to be here.
Organization-wise, I don't think that violates any rules.
Thank you.
I think you just leave the public portion open to allow there to be.
As we did last year.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have motion on the floor to open the public hearing. Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Public hearing is now open.
Are there any comments about this for the public hearing? Ms. Stewart?
Lois Stewart, Flemington. As I understand this, this would take away the opportunity for the public to challenge a de-use variance if the planning board passes it and the public doesn't approve. It was going to be that the public could come before the governing body, and this would negate all that, is that correct?
The public still has the right to appeal to court. This eliminates an extra step because no matter what this public body, this governing body decides, it's going to end up in court no matter what.
But it gives the public the opportunity to voice its concerns and possible objections without having to have a lawyer's bill. And that's a big factor for a lot of people in our town. As you all are very well aware, we have the lowest per capita income in the county. And so people don't have a lot of money to be hiring attorneys to raise questions about actions that the planning or land use board might have taken. So I think that it is in the best interest of the members of the public to have this opportunity made available to them. So I would hope that you would not eliminate that option. So I ask that you retain the option for the public to come before the governing body to voice their concerns and objections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions on the public hearing? Seeing none, hearing none, if we could have a motion to close the public hearing?
Unless, did you want to leave it
No,
open?
we're going to keep it.
Well, no, because he can do it once the motion's made.
I can do what?
Say whatever you want to say.
But
No,
the
but we
point is, it
wanna-
allows the public to
Yes.
Yeah, you can
respond
open
to our
discussion,
statements,
get
ask
open
questions
discussion,
to our
get
statements.
So if I want to ask a question related to something that any of you people say up here, I can still have that opportunity. If you close the public hearing, then that takes that opportunity away from me.
Okay, and then when we make the motion to adopt, we'll just acknowledge, we've already had the council discussion at that point.
So council discussion during the public hearing.
That's, yeah, I don't think that violates any rules, it's just, once we do the motion to adopt, we'll just say motion to adopt, the council discussion's already occurred.
The only thing it does is set precedents going forward.
I think it,
for-
yeah, it doesn't set, I mean, it,
Precedent was set last year.
And that is,
Not when I was on.
I don't
No,
think
it
violates
actually
any
wasn't.
rules, but I think it's, policy of the board, and again, something we've already started talking about, when we do bylaws of the governing body, we can set these out for the future. Again, right now, it doesn't violate any Robert's rules, but I think it's up to the council what you want to do, if you want to close the public portion now and move into the motion, or
I'll leave that up to council if they want to make a motion to close or and move into council discussion.
Do we need a motion to move into council discussion?
You make a motion to close the
you
public
can make a
hearing.
motion to close the public session, or if that
Okay,
doesn't
all right,
pass.
I'm sorry, yeah, okay, all right. That's fine. Well, hearing nothing at this moment, I do want to address what Lois said to my council members and provide her with my thought process in terms of eliminating this option, this specific option for residents. I understand the point in thinking, oh, it's preventing a lawyer's bill for a resident who wants to raise their objections to a D variance that's been granted. I understand that logic. However, what I can understand is a developer who has received the approval, received the D variance from the planning board, not taking that next step to going to court. In almost no circumstance do I see that happening. So to me, that actually, it still does not save the resident any money, because that will go to appeal from the developer. And it will lengthen out that process. And one of my biggest concerns is that this is something that is being done after the fact. We want more people at the planning board meetings. We want more residents to come and say, this is my problem with this D variance, or we want that engagement earlier in the process. And it's one of those things that is just kind of natural in life. We wait and we wait and we wait, like, we want people to be more engaged earlier in that process. So we want you to come and we want you to raise concerns and we want you to give feedback and we want to hear about the trees and we want to hear about those things earlier. So to me, this prolongs the process, and it doesn't save a step. It doesn't save money in the long run. So I understand the logic, but I logistically, reality-wise, I just do not see how that actually works and how that actually plays out.
And it ends up actually costing more in tax dollars because now you have a developer, the applicant, who's now suing because somebody came in and challenged the council.
No, challenge the planning board or land use board.
No, they would come because it would be the borough, the governing body that would overturn an approval, and then now the governing body's going to get sued, and now the governing body has to pay an attorney, a challenge attorney, to go in and defend with that developer in court as well.
But perhaps the governing body, Mayor, could negotiate with the developer so that there would be a more...
Well, I think the governing body can sue over a planning board approval if they so choose.
The governing body would have no authority to change conditions of the approval, change the approval. If any of those things were changed, the developer would have to go back with a whole new application. The governing body's role would be to accept or overturn the decision of the land use board, the planning board. They wouldn't have the authority to change any of the conditions or anything like that. That authority lies with the land use board.
But they could overturn it.
They could overturn it.
But they can also, I think a governing body can also take a vote to go and without an appeal, is my understanding from what I've read recently as I've studied up on this. Is that true that a governing body can actually choose to file a lawsuit against the planning board on an approval?
Yes.
If it so chose to do so.
If you think it is completely out of the realm of what your zoning ordinance allowed, and I would never recommend that. That is, unless it's very extreme circumstances, I never recommend a municipality to sue itself.
No, but it could be done.
I'm sure there are circumstances that would warrant that. I shouldn't say never, I would almost never.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to share my remarks. So I typically write an essay form, and I'm going to spare you that. What I have here is an organized series of points and counterpoints regarding this ordinance. So point number 1, and there's, I believe, 4 points. Planning board members undergo specialized training, which leaves them uniquely equipped to handle decisions related to variances, specifically use variances. Council, which lacks such training, is therefore not fit to oversee such an appeal. What planning board members undergo, just to be clear, is a one-time 5-hour training. Otherwise, they are members of the community with varied knowledge, occupations, and experiences, just as are members of council. Training is not a substitute for these latter qualities, nor should it be considered to supersede such qualities. As just one example, Jeff Doshna, who was on council just last year, has a PhD in city planning and is currently a full-time professor at Temple University. To say that council does not have specialized knowledge and training to hear use variance appeals is simply a gross overgeneralization that fails to recognize the diversity of talents, experiences, and occupations of the people in our community, any one of whom could be elected to council. Point 2, the ordinance is the opposite of business friendly. It sends a huge red flagged anti-development to a potential developer that's interested in coming to Flemington. It's the opposite of what our goals are. My counterpoint is this. To say this ordinance is not business friendly is based on an interpretation of the ordinance given a narrowly defined set of circumstances. This is effectively cherry-picking the circumstances to support the notion that this will be bad for development, end up in the courts, and take more time. Alternatively, if a resident decides to appeal the decision of the planning board to council, and the court and council decides for good reason to reverse, remand, or amend the decision, then there is no extra step for the resident and no need to go through the court system. The developer may be content with such a decision and not seek reversal through the courts. If, however, the developer decides to take the borough to court because of a decision the governing body made with good reason and on behalf of its residents, it is sworn to serve, well then I say bring it on. This ordinance enables the governing body to do its job, and that is to represent those who are elected to serve rather than cowering to special interests. The current ordinance is not business unfriendly, but rather resident friendly, and leaves open the possibility, provided the circumstances, of keeping the borough, residents, developers out of the court system, in effect, accelerating development. Point 3. This is a power grab by the governing body. Yet if this is correctly understood, any interested party may make the appeal. The interested party could even be a dissenting member of the zoning board that approved the variance. Point 4. The ordinance is not common and most municipalities decline to do this and leave it up to the planning board. Therefore, Flemington should repeal the ordinance. Upon cursory research, taking no more than a few minutes, I found several other nearby municipalities and municipalities across the state with this ordinance, including Somerville, Cherry Hill, Ridgewood, Raritan, Holland, Township of Clinton, City of Lambertville. It should be noted, Raritan, along with Somerville, have no problem with development, the latter of which is looked at by many as what Flemington aspires to become. The question, well, not everybody perhaps. The question, of course, is how we are to define common and uncommon. If a third of the 565 municipalities in New Jersey have this ordinance, would it be common or uncommon? Regardless, as I was spending time researching the municipalities that do have the ordinance, it dawned on me that the proper question and concern isn't commonness or uncommonness of any given ordinance, but rather, is it right or wrong for the public good, those who were sworn to serve? In effect, we should be examining the substance of the ordinance itself and what it enacts and enables. Under the existing ordinance, the governing body may reverse, remand, or affirm wholly or in part, with or without the imposition of conditions, the final decision of the planning board approving a variance pursuant to subsection D of section 57 of NJSA 4055D70. The affirmative vote of a majority of the full authorized membership of the governing body shall be necessary to reverse, remand, or modify the final action of the planning board or to impose conditions on or alter conditions to any final action of the planning board. Otherwise, the final action of the board shall be deemed to be affirmed. Such action must be taken within 95 days of publishing of the planning board decision. The municipal land use law provides that certain land use decisions can be appealed to the governing body, but these appeals are limited to situations where the zoning board of adjustment has granted a use variance and where there has been an ordinance authorizing such an appeal. Why this special exception for a D, or otherwise known as use variance? The granting of a use variance might have a serious effect on the overall zoning plan of the municipality, and it is appropriate, therefore, for the governing body to have the right to review the action of the zoning board of adjustment in granting a use variance, provided that an objector brings the matter to the governing body by the way of an appeal. The party objecting to the granting of a use variance has the choice of appealing the decision of the zoning board of adjustment to the governing body or going directly into the New Jersey Superior Court to seek to have the variance declared invalid. Any other actions of the zoning board of adjustment or of the planning board can only be challenged by taking the matter to the New Jersey Superior Court. The reason for this distinction is that the denial of a variance does not constitute an action contrary to the zoning ordinance or the master plan, whereas an approval is contrary to the zoning ordinance, which was previously voted on and established by no other than the governing body. It seems appropriate, therefore, that the governing body has the ability to review such decisions, if so requested, on behalf of those who are sworn to serve, the service of which is accomplished in part through ordinances such as zoning ordinances that are meant to benefit and protect the public good. While it is true that an applicant or an interested party who has agreed by a decision of the planning board or zoning board of adjustment may take their case to the New Jersey Superior Court judicial review is intended to be a determination of the validity of the action being appealed and is not intended for the court to substitute its judgment for that of the local officials. In reviewing the ordinance, it is not for the courts to substitute their conception of what the public welfare requires by way of zoning ordinance regulations for the views of those in whom the legislature and the local electorate have vested that authority and responsibility. What this means in effect is that without the existing ordinance in place, a resident can take a planning board decision to the courts, but the courts only consider the legality of the decision, not issue a judgment of whether such a decision was best for the community, the latter of which is the responsibility of the governing body. Repealing the existing ordinance takes away our responsibility and the rights and representation of those who are elected to serve. Last but not least, at its heart, this is a social justice issue. As the legislative body, we may not be able to provide justice, but we can provide fairness. That is what the existing appeals ordinance enables, the public's access to their elected representatives. We are, as stated by the public here, the lowest median income community in the county. Many, if not most of our constituents, cannot afford to appeal their decisions to the court system. This provides them another avenue directly to the representative government. This provides them with a voice they otherwise would not have, for no other reason than they cannot afford to speak through the courts. It is our job to give a voice to the voiceless. The existing ordinance allows us to do our job. We need to do our job tonight and preserve it by voting down its repeal tonight. If you think otherwise, if you want to take away people's right to voice their concerns in our community, then I think each one of us owes them to look them in their faces tonight before they vote and explain why it is they're voting. And that's all I have.
How is it taking away people's voice? When we ask people, when we have public comments and we ask for people's public input early in these decisions, and we need more of that discussion early in these decisions. I don't,
Well, we listen to public input, but the initial decision is by the zoning board of adjustment.
And they have a public hearing process.
Well, sure they have a public process, but they're not directly accountable to the people that they are elected to serve, which is us.
They don't listen.
The issue is, so if somebody comes in and they say, I don't like that D variance that was given, and so council then by a majority vote says, you know what, we agree, it's a horrible decision, so now you have a developer who's now suing the municipality to uphold their rights in the original process. It adds another step. And really, the court will then, I would imagine, rule based upon the substance of the planning board appeal, or the planning board approval, rather than.
It's all, everybody looks at, even the council, under your current ordinance, you're bound to look at whether that decision was arbitrary and capricious and things like that. You can't just because I don't like this variance or you don't like this variance. It has to be based on something, or it is an appealable decision. And that's what sort of the governing body and the courts are both bound to do.
Both bound to do. So even if, even if this council unanimously agreed that that's a horrible D variance and they should never have given it unless there's a legal grounds to undo the planning board decision, they legally can't do it. It's still going to go to court, and then it's just another step, and it's tax dollars spent to fight the redeveloper now.
But
For the redeveloper who's going to sue the borough.
But the council is supposed to do
I'm
what's in
sorry,
the best.
you need to state your name.
Lois Stewart Flemington. The council is supposed to uphold and do what is in the best interest of this community. And in the past, I have not seen that has always been the case by the planning/board of adjustment. So this gives the opportunity to raise the appropriateness of a decision to the governing body who has been elected to do what's best for the citizens of this town, not what's best for the developer.
But this governing body cannot rule in opposition to the municipal land use law, from what I understand. And so if the planning board approval is legal and legal, according to the municipal land use law, then you're just spinning your wheels at that point, and you're just spending tax dollars to defend something that perhaps is not defendable.
You don't know till you go, Betsy.
Well, I know that I'd have people up here yelling at us about tax dollars. And if you think a developer's not gonna sue over the reversal of a planning board approval, I think you're wrong. And I think that it's gonna spend money unnecessarily.
And part
Tax dollars.
And part of our jobs is to balance and fit everything together. So listening to residents, listening to and understanding not everybody agrees on everything, and that we need commercial investment, and we need businesses, we need jobs, and all of those things have to work together, and encouraging conversations where we can, but also taking the onus of making hard decisions. And we have given that power, all of us have given that power to the planning board as well, to take those things into account, but they also have to legally abide by private property law, and so that if it's your private property, there are limitations in terms of what we can tell someone to do, what to do on that private property. So we have to balance all of these things, and it's not always easy. It's not like...
But a use variance requires very specific conditions.
It does.
It requires that certain things be proven and demonstrated, and many of those things that need to be proven and demonstrated are very subjective things. There are things that you can't clearly define on one side of the line or the other. And so while planning board may say, well, they have demonstrated that they have been able to demonstrate a benefit to the public and that there is no harm involved, well, those can be subjective things. And while the zoning board may find one way, it could be appealed by the community, come to council, and we could find differently regarding whether there are benefits and harms to the community and whether those are adequately demonstrated. So much of this is subjective.
I think one of the problems also is that we're speaking without context. Given a specific example, I think it's easy to understand why the council on October 28th passed this with only 2 dissenting votes. At that time, planning board had just passed such a variance for the circle sign over on 31202. And regardless of your feelings about that, we were told on council, don't comment on this. Although if you had praise for it, that was okay. So don't comment on this. It might come before the council. Well, it was never coming before the council. And what we did was, it was at that time that we found that such an ordinance could be available, but it would not be available in time for that one project. No, rather that project illustrated the need. So a statement's been made here that the public gets a chance to speak, but do we really listen to them? Would be my question. And we can go back to the minutes from October 28th, and I have them in front of me, and certainly there were members of this community who spoke to the planning board being no less receptive to comments than this council and past councils have been criticized for. So back to the circle sign. My concern for it, and having attended a meeting and following meetings online, was that the question of safety was addressed by the applicant's safety expert, and to me it left some things lacking, but not to the planning board. To residents who reached out to me, they said it left things lacking. We have a reporter here from TAP, and you can look back to TAP and you can see there are questions about the procedure of the meeting and the accessibility of the experts to the community. And as one resident, Ms. Elaine Gorman, stated, the process of the planning board, I'm reading from the minutes, criticized the planning board as lacking transparency and denying people a chance to speak. Again, I'd reference people either to the video or to TAP. So what if that had come to the council? Imagine, I'm going to say that just for the sake of context. So it comes to the council and we're told, oh, well, we would stop it. We don't have to stop it. In fact, I said this previously, and when this ultimately passed, the ordinance that we're discussing now passed on October 28th, the discussion was, in such an instance, the council can make a determination, and in that context, we could have said, we'd like to send it back to the planning board, and we had the question on safety. Yet the specter of lawsuits and lawyers and all these things that could or might happen, this is a safeguard for the community, and removing it removes the safeguards for the community. And I apologize for myself, and I apologize to the peers that this council is saying that they know better than the residents and just to blindly trust us.
Robin. Tell us who you are.
Sure. I'm Robin Lapidus. Oh, really? Okay. I'm taking with me though.
Come on, do it.
Okay. I'm Robin Lapidus. I am the Executive Director of the Flemington Community Partnership, and my job is to represent the commercial interests and stakeholders, property owners, business owners of this town who do not vote per se, but are taxed to have a representative, and that's why I'm here tonight. I personally think the safeguard of any community is the system and its democracy, and they don't sue each other because they figure it out before it goes to the planning board and before it goes to the council. And I've lived in a community like that. I've worked in a community like that. We got the developments the community wanted, and nobody ever 100% agreed about anything, but that's democracy. So, you know, I don't know that this is necessary, but I think Lois brought up a very interesting example of the kiosk. Our welcome kiosk is wrapped in a blanket with duct tape and says, that's not welcoming. That doesn't show progress. That shows we're stuck, and that isn't the only thing that's wrapped up in this community in, duct tape and chains and other things, and we just have to figure out how to move on. I'm just concerned that I don't know that I believe that this is going to help us move forward. I think those kinds of conversations, the charrettes that we're hoping to have, are the answer, because you have to figure this stuff out in conversation, in open public hearings before you get to the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you for your consistency in statements. That's really exactly what you had said previously, and I agreed with you then as well. It's important to do the work up front, to be transparent. You will not get everyone to agree, but when people have a problem with the process and how the process unfolded.
And so that's one of those things and that we learned, and that I think is now okay to talk about, since we have minutes that are from our executive session that are public, right? From our meeting that we went to?
Yeah, they haven't
No,
been
they're
made
not
public.
public yet. Okay.
Okay.
Well, there is an important piece that, about having things on the record and having these discussions publicly and having these discussions early. And as much as Jeremy makes himself available for conversations at coffee places, and as much as we have individual conversations back and forth with residents, and as important as that is, and as I want your emails and as I want your feedback, that is not representative of the entire borough. Getting things transparent and getting things, understanding the seriousness of our job, understanding the seriousness of the planning board's job, and that they take that. So I'm just struggling. I'm just struggling in how this doesn't make things more difficult in terms of having this ordinance or having this appeal process, and how it just doesn't make things more difficult for everyone involved. So it's something I'm struggling with.
And I want to point out also, you know, and Councilman Harris like speaks of the transparency. Fact is in May, you know, using the circle sign as an example, he came in and all of the council came in, you know, a couple at a time to see it. And there was certainly plenty of opportunity then for each member of council to go and say, gosh, this isn't maybe such a great idea, or talk to the residents and say, hey, this guy came in, he wants to build a billboard or a sign at the circle. And, you know, nobody on council, I don't think, had those conversations, because at the end of those kind of little show and tells, I got the impression that pretty much everybody liked it. Krista raised some concerns about the circle traffic, but that was it. That was the only real concern I heard from people, because, and the reason to have this guy come in ahead of time was in case council said, oh my God, this is a horrible idea. We would have gone back and said, hey, you know, it's a horrible idea, go down the road somewhere. But that didn't happen, even though that opportunity for that to happen was there. And that's where those conversations can take place. And when we get to, you know, down here on Liberty Village, it'll be the same conversations coming out in advance of saying, hey, this is what we're doing. You know, I mentioned tonight that, you know, we're starting the process for redevelopment agreement for Agway, and you know who's on the, you know, Jeremy's on that committee and Chris is on that committee. Those opportunities are there, and to call up and say to Chris or say to Jeremy or say to me and go, hey, make sure you don't give an agreement that's as bad as the one the guy on Main Street got. Those conversations need to be had ahead of time, not after approvals. And I think that we have done a very good job in trying to put that stuff out there. And if council members don't take it back to those they talk about all the time, talk with all the time, then, you know, that bus has left the station.
But if a developer wants to build, let's say, a multi-family unit housing next to your house, right? I mean, and Pat goes through planning board, they approve. I mean, it's going to affect your quality of life. It's going to affect traffic. It's going to affect your view. It can affect your air quality, health, and a whole number of things that can affect you and your family. And I don't understand why Raritan Township affords its citizens rights that we're not willing to afford ourselves. You know, this can affect people's lives, the people we're elected to represent. And all this is really a system of checks and balances. You've got the governing body who votes on zoning ordinances. We affirm these zoning ordinances. D-use variances are exceptions to those ordinances. So why should they not, if it affects the people we're elected to represent, why should it not come back to the governing body for additional review?
I think also, to state that no one had said anything about this, remember how I started this? We were told, by all means, don't discuss this, unless you want to support it. But don't discuss this at all.
You
And I
discussed
think
it at a council meeting,
And I think I
sir.
can point to multiple instances where I said, such a sign might be safer if it were moved north, where there's a traffic control device, and it has been proven by the same applicant.
I have a question.
Ms. Brown.
Do I have to get up?
Yeah.
Get up to the microphone, thank you.
Sorry.
My
Maybe
head
some-
is still broken. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a question, Joanne Braun, Flemington. What's wrong with agreeing with Chris? What's the problem?
I personally disagree. I don't get to vote them in case, except only in case of a tie. I think it's an extra step, as I mentioned
But what would be
earlier.
the downfall? I mean, I don't see a problem with it.
This came about because of our attorney, and because it's something that she recommended to all of the municipalities that she's working with. So if you'd like to exaggerate.
It adds an extra step because it doesn't solve the problem you're hoping to solve. It adds an extra bureaucratic step.
Well, if you're someone who doesn't want that development, then you may be happy with that extra step.
And if you get the extra step, you're not gonna sue too.
But
Right?
that's not how planning is done, right? You can't do,
Hang on,
this is not a general conversation, this is a public hearing.
Yeah, I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
But I just don't see, like, if it's one extra step and it could avoid conflict and
I don't see how it does.
It
That's my
creates conflict.
that's my
I think it
sticking point.
creates conflict.
I don't see how it avoids
well,
it.
if the resident who was upset with whatever the decision was gets that extra step and it still falls in the favor of the developer, whoever's that is, then that person would be fulfilled. They would feel like they got their say.
That's what public hearings are for.
I know, but sometimes public hearings are not, you're hearing, but you're not listening. I'm not talking about you guys, but you might know where I'm coming from. You have to know where I'm coming from because you guys were on this side once. So you do know what I'm talking about. They're hearing, but they're not listening. They're just gonna do what they're gonna do anyway.
So
That's a fact.
I'm new. I'm new. And
Okay.
one thing I've learned in my very, very, very short amount of time here is that things move very slow in local government. And that's by design. And it's important that they move slow.
So we don't screw it up too fast.
I'm the liaison to the planning board. And you know, I mean, I sit there with many individuals. There's architects, there are planners, there's engineers, there's another lawyer. Department of Public Works is represented. It's a, from my estimation, a pretty well-rounded crew. Experts. And so
Who live in the community.
they run through the process. And yes, there's a public hearing on it. But me to sit there and to feel confident that these people are doing the right thing, this ordinance went through them, and here we are now. It's been through the process. So when I think about this, and back to my point, local government moves very slow. These ordinances are resolute, it's a slow process by design to make sure that it's done right. And I mean, just because I'm there and I'm new and I'm still learning, it's just I look at these people and I can kind of lean on them. And I personally think they know what they're talking about. And so we run through that.
And they also have their own personal desires sometimes. And I know this because after
I'm sorry,
planning.
Joanne Braun?
Joanne
name?
Braun.
Yeah.
Joanne
This
Braun.
isn't, you can't, it's not a two-way, really, you know.
Well, I'm still
not the way-
commenting on my the same comment. Why I said what would be the problem with that one extra step? And I'm just saying because he talked about the planning board now, which I really wasn't. You know, I wasn't really bringing that part up, the expertise of everybody. But I did hear a very prominent planning board member after one of the meetings of the Agway Global, they were gonna do an amphitheater. And he wanted that amphitheater and somebody very prominent in the community thought it was a bad idea. And he basically said to somebody else, and I just happened to hear it, tell her to leave if she doesn't like it.
Yeah, you're reporting hearsay, so.
Well, it's hearsay, but it's a fact because I heard it with my own ears. So that's all.
But in such a case, would that not give Mr. Long, who leads liaison to the planning board, the opportunity to say, I have confidence in the planning board in their decision, whatever the context was, and I don't support a review, but not to remove the means for a review to occur. This is a tool. You get to decide if you're going to use it or not. What I'm hearing is, we don't even want to have the tool in our toolbox.
Mr. Cornelison.
Saying all the other communities that have this.
Rich Cornelison, 134 Main Street. Yes, it takes time to get through this process. It's taken 10 years to get to this point, 10 years. Think about the businesses on Main Street. We're going to end up in the same place if we take this additional step. This town is dead on Main Street. Yes, you represent community members. But imagine being a property owner on Main Street. Business improvement taxes go up. Real estate taxes go up. People move out. Each year, your expenses keep on a property to clear. It looks like a nice property I don't want to say this for the record, and I don't want to publicize it.
You're on the record.
No, I'll say it for the record, but I would prefer it not get in the paper.
It's being videotaped right now, just so you know.
Don't say it.
Don't say it if you don't want to publish.
Okay, I was gonna give you some financials.
Yeah, don't say it if you don't want to
I'll
publish.
leave that out. But it's a struggle to keep these businesses going. Whatever you do, let's take the shortcut. Let's get beyond it. Let's get beyond it.
Even if it's not right.
It's time we brought this town to life. And even if we make a decision, whatever that decision is, to move this down forward, it's gonna be another 3-4 years before the project is even completed. We're looking at, say what?
The Courthouse Square project would not be impacted by this at this point.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, we need to move.
But sir, I appreciate also you saying the need to take shortcuts, need to do this. I'm hearing by any means necessary. I hear the concern and the desperation. I think that as a tool, what this does is it lets people know their checks and balances so that people are more thorough, more accurate, do things more clearly so that it's easy for councilmen. Again, what we're talking about is whether or not to even have a tool in the toolbox, which our friends in Raritan Township and others have as well.
But what is the, I mean, what does the tool do? Like, if there's not meat behind it. There's nothing binding by it.
I see, so after the fire, then we invest in the fire department. That's what I'm hearing.
No, I want people to come to planning board. I want people to have this, that's the entire point. Come, let's talk about these things earlier. I think that's something we all agree on. Like, and that's not what this does.
This just delays
I
it.
didn't hear what I said.
But talking to the planning board doesn't mean that they'll listen, and if they don't listen,
But you can't please everybody.
True.
well, you can't please everybody, but you should represent everybody. And that's what this does. It allows for representation of people who can't afford a voice through the court system. That's really what this is about to me. Is about offering everyone a voice and a level playing field.
If everybody wasn't interested in that voice, they'd be here telling us otherwise. I see a couple of three property owners, 4 property owners actually, 5 property owners, excuse me, I forgot that you do own some commercial property, and 3 residents. And I just really don't believe that they necessarily represent the entirety of the community either.
I agree. I don't see that the people that are present necessarily is representing the whole community, or I'm not even going to estimate what portion of it. But what I think we've all heard, certainly we've heard when we were running for office, is that people do not want to come to council meetings anymore because they don't see the benefit. They don't feel that they are being heard.
Amen.
Any other comments? Lois?
Lois Stewart Flemington. My question now is.
Lois, microphone, sorry.
Are you saying that all these other communities, Somerville, Lambertville, Raritan Township, they all missed the boat? They're just having an extra step that's going to do nothing. I can't believe that. I can't believe that these varied communities throughout our state who have this on their books are less competent and able, and they in their
I don't think they have any litigious community groups either then, Lois.
I don't know that.
I have not heard of Friends of Lambertville, although the mayor there wants to build a new town.
They're having a big time down there.
But I don't know if the Friends of Raritan Township or the Friends of Clinton Township.
Because they didn't have an abomination forced on them. We were forced into that. You think I like spending all my time trying to save my community? I'm old.
A lot of people disagree with you on that, Lois.
There are a lot of people who are in agreement too, and they are the silent majority. But at any rate.
We need to
my-
keep these
my
comments out
question-
this
yes,
ordinance.
My question is, how do you justify thumbing your nose at the other communities in our state that have this on their books?
I think this makes us more efficient than them.
Robin. Sorry, I think it's very convenient to not want to be Somerville sometimes, and now we want to be Somerville. We can't have, you don't, government doesn't work by those kind of equivalences. I think we want to be the best government we can be and the most inclusive, but I really think that the inclusivity has to be built into the front part. You front load inclusivity and democracy and conversations. I understand there is that possibility that somebody could have missed all that or a bad decision gets made, but I still think if there's faith and hope in trust in the people that are elected, you don't need this tool at the end for the possibility that you didn't do it right all along, because I think we really need to invest in a little bit of belief that we can be a functioning community where people have the opportunity to get together and represent their interests. And that's where, I think that's where you put the effort, is to be sure that if that resident whose livelihood is going to be eclipsed by some horrible abomination of a building, that they have a chance to speak, and you make decisions not based on one person but for the greater good. And I just don't know that I think this is a little more cattle prod than carrots and opportunities for the good things that are supposed to happen when people work together. That's my concern. And I do think I really listened very carefully to what you said about commonness and uncommonness and business friendliness and not business friendliness. But I really feel like we spend so much time worrying, so much time blaming each other and worrying about these one-off situations and not really spending a lot of time having those fruitful conversations. And that's what worries me. And I really hope we can move past it. Get some things done.
Anyone else?
Well, I just don't think that we can pretend that special interests and political interests don't play a part in this process. And I understand, and I think, planning board council does to a large extent listen to the public. That's our job. But we can't pretend that these interests aren't there and in part drive the process. And when that process is driven by those interests and take over the better interests of the community and any one individual, there is this mechanism in place to afford everyone an opportunity to have a voice. Now, it was said earlier that it sounded like I was mistaking the people here for the entire community, and no. I represent all 4,000 some odd people in this borough, and what this ordinance allows is for any one person in this borough, regardless of income level, to have a voice. Without this ordinance, only the rich have a voice.
It's not true.
Power to the people.
That's not, but that's just not true.
How is it not true?
They voted for you.
They voted for us to represent them.
Yes.
They also can, they can reach out to us, they can communicate. If they are going to take this step, to do this appeal, at that point in time, after a deed variance has been granted, that is just as much, if not more effort than coming to planning board and putting their voice on the record, than reaching out to us and having a one-on-one conversation. That is voice, that is there. They can get on the record, they can get that attention.
It's a voice, but what if they're not listened to?
That's right.
Should I find something?
And there is no, but there is.
I need to take a 5-minute
Okay,
break. Can
sure.
I just run out of the room for a second? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We'll adjourn for 5 minutes.
Is there a fire?
Fire was,
Does anybody know what's going on? This is the third time.
There's, one of them was, smoke.
There were two.
Feather bed lane.
This is an open bird on Main Street.
Why have we had three? We hardly ever had all this hullabaloo.
I think there was a gas leak because as I was coming here, Main Street had fire trucks everywhere. And then as I turned the corner, there was one going this way and I smelled gas very strong. That's my,
There was a gas.
it was, okay, I smelled, I
There was
was
a
like,
gas leak,
yeah.
and there was smoke.
Smokes and an
That
open
was
bird.
somebody having a campfire in their
Where
backyard.
was the gas leak, on Main Street?
Well, that's where I smelled it when I turned the corner to come here. I was like, whoa, I smell gas. And there was fire trucks everywhere.
One of them was a mutual aid call, Verity Town. One of the gas smells.
They're earning those volunteers are earning their pay tonight.
That's it.
They're
Give
non-pay.
them 1,000% rate.
They're
It's on zero.
non-pay. Right where my where our building is, right where Dolce Restaurant.
Oh,
But
okay.
not right there, but across the railroad tracks. By Fulper Road, they were lined up. Yeah. And then I came here and they were flying down the road.
Gotta get you a sign that says, Sally has to use the restroom. Jeremy stepped out and Michael did too. So we should wait.
The kids were really great. They went and got most of the records, except for the ones that were like Algebra Ferran. They're kind of far out.
Yes.
And that's when
We get some buckets.
Okay.
Jeremy's out though.
We're gonna need diapers.
Jeremy's out. If you wanna go.
Jeremy's out. Does somebody else need to use the restroom?
No, you mind if I go pick up
No,
some? One goes, everybody gotta go.
Sorry.
Thanks,
Obviously it was a, it was.
it's funny because
eyes are getting yellow.
I don't get a deduction. Yeah, I might say, like, you know what, I'd like to get to, or buy them pizza or something, so like, you know, if you're gonna use this. And so, I'm gonna pull up the branches and branches and put them in separate, or carts. And then, put them in, plastic to dry out, and then we'll come pick them up. So, it's supposed to be really nice, and it's
Off and on.
Wednesday's supposed to rain. Tomorrow, so if there's no driving, that would be something to do, and then you can tell me what's a good treat, and we'll come up with something good. Okay. Yeah.
Are there any more comments on the public hearing? We have a motion to close the public.
Oh, I'll move. I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
She hardly got to her chair.
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
We're voting on closing the hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Oh, yes.
We have a motion to adopt ordinance 2020-1.
So moved.
I'll second.
Tilly, I believe that the agreement was that the comments would be during the public hearing, so if we could go right to a vote, please. Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
No.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
No.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
It passes. So that passed by a 4-2.
It's a good discussion. I appreciate that.
Next up is a resolution 2020-59. This is authorization to submit grant application and execute a grant agreement with Hunterdon County Economic Development for zoning review / update. If we could have a motion.
So moved.
Could somebody
Second.
explain what
Okay.
that is?
So what this is. Wait a minute, I didn't catch the motion and second there. Who moved it?
It was Michael and Chris.
So what this is as part of the, and we'll talk about this the opportunity zone, we're asking the EDC to swap out the grant approval that we put in there for a zoning overview rework as part of the grant application. We're asking them if we can swap that out for a traffic parking circulation study, and we have to get permission from the EDC. Assuming the EDC gives us that, I wanted this resolution to be approved, if council so wants to approve it, so that I can then immediately turn around and go and ask the county for money. The county has been very generous with other communities in town with grants for rewriting and zoning code look-ats and studies. This is in advance of doing our master plan this year, and that way maybe we can save a few dollars and get the county to pick some up. So I just want to be ready to go. Is there an application to the county ready to go at this point? No. But if we're able to convince the EDC to swap out the opportunity zone, this part of the opportunity zone grant, then I want to have it ready to go so we can go. It does have a 10% match, so if we ask for $20,000, we'll have to come up with $2,000. If we come up with 30, they gave like Raritan Township like nearly $40,000. I think Frenchtown got about 12 or 15. So there is a 10% grant if we get approved for a grant from the County Economic Development. Any other comments?
Is there, how much, do we know how much we're applying for?
We haven't applied yet, no.
The estimates have been anywhere
Is
from
there a
like
maximum?
5 to,
Yeah, probably, I'll probably ask for like 25. I don't think we got it. 10%, 2,500.
and I think it's something that's needed.
Yes.
Because we still talk about zoning for sewing machine shops and things like
Yeah. So it's necessary, and it's all part of the whole thing. Well, part of redoing the master plan and also doing the center designation with the state is these, the public feedback sessions, which the charrette will cover that ground for us when we do it. And so it all kind of ties in. And so basically between the opportunity zone grant, this, some other issues, we're kind of picking, put all these pieces into place so that when we're ready to sit down and involve the public to rewrite a master plan, some new zoning improvements to modernize our zoning, we'll be ready to go, rather than waiting to the last minute. So there's not an actual grant application ready to go at this point. Any other comments, questions? Sally?
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Heenan?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Thank you. Next up is Resolution 2020-60. This is establishing an ad hoc committee on the redevelopment of Liberty Village. We could have a motion.
I'll move it if I'm not on the committee.
So what this is, as I mentioned earlier, out of the blue, literally out of the blue, I got a phone call a couple of weeks ago, and it's a guy, Nassim, I forget his last name. He owns Namdar Realty, and he wants to introduce himself. And, hey, do you have any plans? He said they bought that property pretty much sight unseen and on spec. They had no idea, they didn't buy it for a purpose. They just decided to buy this property. I had a nice conversation with them, and that was the end, and I put his phone number into my phone and said, let me figure out and talk around. I talked with Robin. I'm bring it to council at some point, which would be tonight. And then again, out of the blue, I get this email. Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I've been hired by Mason Asset Realty, which is the operating part of Namdar, and I've been hired to come up with a redevelopment plan for Liberty Village. Okay, that's interesting. And so it just made clear to me that obviously Lois and others probably do not want me unilaterally deciding what the Liberty Village redevelopment plan would be. I wouldn't want myself to be in that position. And so I decided that we would put together a redevelopment, an ad hoc committee on the redevelopment of Liberty Village. It would include the mayor, one council member, one person from the Flemington Community Partnership for Business Community and one resident, all appointed by me. I was hoping actually that Jess Hand would be that council member. However, we measured and her property line is 175 feet from the property line of Liberty Village. So I do not have that committee yet. I will announce it at the next council meeting as to who that will be. And go from there. I promise it will be hopefully the best people to do it. Constable will, as we get moving, if this comes to fruition, and just so you know, the conversations I did have with him, Lois, I did suggest a supermarket. I suggested a multiplex movie screen.
Theaters they're not interested in theaters, Mayor, they're interested in what we are.
Well, I know, they're not, but I had to suggest it anyways. But I did suggest a supermarket.
But I
And there's
hope
other
that
conversations about supermarkets happening too in town. I suggested perhaps some kind of for-profit rec thing, kind of facility for kids and families. So those conversations will come up over the course of meetings coming up perhaps over the summer as we go forward.
And could I make a suggestion that we think about a facility for our older adults that as they become more in need of supervised care, and I don't mean a nursing home. I mean something that is humane and would provide an opportunity for people to
So you
live
should
out,
call me.
live out
tell
their
me.
last years of their lives in a dignified fashion. Like
So,
we don't-
so this will be an ongoing conversation. This is not a conversation, there's nothing decided, it's just appointment of the committee.
I know, but I'm just saying the committee needs to keep in mind what
Thank
this community needs, not
Thank you.
what.
There's another public comment session coming up, Lois.
Not what the
Thank you.
developer
Lois,
needs.
there's another public comment session coming
But I
up.
have a whole list.
Can we please, is there any other comments on this?
Just a question. What's the difference between an ad hoc committee and just a committee? What is ad hoc?
Ad hoc means advisory.
Yeah.
What is it, Sal?
It means
Advisory.
advisory.
Privy to the-
They just don't, they're not set up by an ordinance, they can't really, they can't.
They don't have a lot
They don't have
Yeah.
any money to spend.
Yeah.
It's just advisory, it's just like the Global Ag is an ad hoc committee, for instance. You know, and they'll come back, whoever is on there will come back and report to council as to where those conversations are going. Sally, if you call the vote?
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Thank you. Next up, Resolution 2020-61. This is authorizing an official payment of $4,900 to Clark Peyton Haynes in connection with the update of the historic district map. If we could have a motion.
I'll move it.
There's a second, Kim? This one's yours.
Okay.
Or Caitlin's.
Do you want to start and I'll finish?
Sure, yeah, so approximately a year and a half ago, prior to me being on council, the council did authorize and engage with Clark Peyton Hints for approximately $12,000 to redo the historic map, understanding that certain properties have changed over the years in terms of, are they significantly contributing to the historic aspect of our town? Are they working against it, which is called encroaching? So there's all these fancy ways and designations for the historic map, and it is severely, the current one is severely outdated, and it was certainly well due time to take another look at that and fix some inconsistencies and make sure it's accurately representing our town. So so Clark Peyton Hints did do a significant amount of work last year on that. I don't think I'm done.
Yeah, I don't think Clark Peyton has estimated for the amount of times the HPC committee needed revisions and more review of the map. So unfortunately, the proposal was understated by quite a few hours.
And this was not a bill that there's been some negotiation around this.
Yes.
This amount, this is coming down.
This is a
and it was not, I thought we were.
Right, we weren't expecting, and the HPC has agreed to take this money out of the current year's budget.
Right, so the
Just-
HPC is
just have-
gonna cover this 4,900 out of their budget?
For the 2020 budget.
Okay, thank you.
So what I don't understand is, I thought that map was on the planning board agenda at the end of last year. Is this an old bill or a new bill? I thought that map was done at the end of last year.
No, we were supposed to present at the planning board, and they canceled us, and then
Gave you time to take a
we
moment.
had.
Bringing out a meeting.
Yeah, there was that. We had realized at the end of the year that early in the year, we had received conflicting information from some planning board professionals. It just became, we had to go a different avenue with the way the map was progressing. I don't.
And I think to provide some clarity, because the map itself was done such a long time ago, there was not a clear procedure for how to update it. Who needed to approve it, who needed to be presented to. So that was some of why
Notification of residents.
to make sure they were aware of the potential changes to the HPC map. But why the presentation towards the planning board, there was gonna be another presentation at one point, but they didn't actually have to approve anything, even though they got the information and they were able to provide feedback, which I think was very much appreciated by the HPC at that time.
So it's still being worked on?
No.
That's, I think the issue was whether it had to go for, to expand the boundaries, needed to be an ordinance.
Correct. And then that's
Just
where
updated is just a planning board master plan thing.
right, it'll be, the new historic map will be, or the updated historic map will be incorporated in the master plan update for 2020.
With the same boundaries.
Correct, within the same boundaries.
Internally though.
Okay, but changing designation of some home.
Correct.
Does this mean that overspending, or authorization of overspending occurred last year that we're being asked to approve now?
This is when it was brought to my attention.
It was not presented last year.
Correct.
Because we are, the 12,000 was, as we recorded last year's council budget meetings, and that, the 12,000, that was a stretch, and here we're increasing it by 40%.
It was actually 2018 that it was approved, the 12,000.
So, and I'm not,
Was it put through? at
I'm
that
not-
time?
Yeah, it was the 2018 budget.
yes.
And we recorded that too.
Yeah.
Good.
So I'm certainly not happy about the situation, but the fact that the HPC, who typically gets a budget of $8,000 a year,
10.
$10,000 a year in the budget, and they are saying that this will come from their budget. So that to me, this is the situation we have. We've negotiated down the bill. It would have been.
Has the scope of work changed so that this will be utilized in the new master plan review?
Yeah, that's what I just said, that's how we're going to
So that's clearly beyond.
officially accept.
That's clearly beyond what we had before. So some aspect of that 4,900 is allowing us to utilize this in the master plan review.
Yes.
So there's
Correct.
some new business here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
It's another notch in that master plan update.
Okay. And when it was approved, thank you for 2018, I know we were talking about 2018. The point when it was ultimately approved was that it was necessary to give us access to other funding, other grants.
That's part of the certified local government
Right.
that the HPC will,
Right, so we
correct.
needed it. That was
Right,
the
we needed
purpose.
this project to be completed.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments?
Well, so if the HPC eats the cost on this, are they gonna have the funds to do their normal yearly, whatever it is they?
We intend to be, our intention was to be much more efficient this year with our professionals. And we just will have to be
And
much
I
more
think,
efficient.
and I suspect you will be with the change in leadership.
Correct, that, I think has a,
They've mapped out those costs,
yeah.
which I've been impressed by. Even though I'm no longer on New Jersey.
Thanks, Caitlin.
But I was last week. Could you call the vote, Sally?
Yep. Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes. And thank you, everybody, for approving that.
Next up is Resolution 2020-62, authorizing the partial closure of Maple Avenue on March 21st, 2020 for Maker's Day event sponsored by MediaTek.
And I'll move this.
Second.
I know, it's a nice sunny day, have being able to set up the solar telescopes again and have some sidewalk project. Maple Ave was already closed between spring and May, and that worked out perfectly for our event, so we closed it this year.
Any other comments, questions? Sally?
Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
I need to abstain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next up, Resolution 2020-31. This is reappointing Ken McCormick as fire official. This is a 3-year? Or is it a 4-year? 3-year by ordinance to expire December 31st, 2022.
I'll move.
Second.
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Thank you, and I'm quite certain that Ken thanks you as well. Next up, Resolution 2020-63. This is reaffirming the establishment of a creative team and putting terms on there. It was brought to my attention that when we did it last year, it was for a 1-year term. So, there it is. If we could have a motion.
I'll move.
Second. Any comments, questions?
Are they staggered term limits?
They are. Okay, so last year, this was kind of rolling around the empty space in my head, of which there is much. And then to do this, we don't have bylaws for our council, for whatever reason. They're not there. And then Michael suggested, that we have a resolution recording all the meetings, which we do, both audio and video. And there's some other things. We had social media last year that came up. So all these little things that come up and then fall by the wayside because it needs to be policy. So Tara, probably either reading my head or me saying, word policy. I don't really remember that conversation. So this came up that let's put this together. That way doing all these different resolutions, saying this is that, resolutions as council members likely know, but the public may not, expire at the end of the year. So when a new council comes in on the first Wednesday or the January 2nd, whenever we do the reorg, the resolutions past the previous year no longer hold any water or weight. So if we do this, we can put a full policy together, and then during the reorg, it can just be readopted as necessary. And policy can be a living, breathing situation. It can be updated as need be. Tara's conversation, when I talked to Tara earlier today, she thinks that there are enough board policies out there for other towns, similar to Flemington, that we can just plagiarize them.
There's also, there's like model policies that the lead municipalities put out, so you can take that as a starting point, so you're not spending, 20 hours of time coming up with something out of nothing.
Is this maybe?
So that's that. Any other comments?
Yes, so what I did was I had proposed a resolution that we record the public portion of our meetings, ultimately be able to publish and archive it. And the mayor said that we do many of those things, and that it has brought to light this discussion of policy. We have a number of policies. I think it's a terrific idea if we can review that, and I think it's time well spent, and I agree with you. I'm sure it's been done before. League of Municipalities would be a terrific source. I do want to, because I know we want to keep these things going, but I do want to make a motion to amend the agenda to offer the resolution as I had provided, which according to our, I guess, standing practice has been since I've been on council and it's been presented each year, that when a resolution is presented that should go to the agenda, it should be received by Wednesday preceding the meeting by noon. And there's never been an
Are you
instance.
amending the agenda?
Yes, I, well, I'm.
Well, no, there's a
I'm
motion on the,
making-
there's a motion on the
Make it
table.
known that I will be doing that. I don't want to just see like, let's rush through. Very simple language to do just what we're saying, and I
Okay,
think it'll
but
be a great way
we
to
have
start
to
things
finish
off.
with the motion that's on the table
Certainly we do.
first.
This is a part of the discussion. So,
No, there's a motion on the table, you can make a motion to amend after.
so long as we're not just going, and let's move right into the next piece. Want to make sure we have the time for that.
Okay.
Thanks.
I just have a question. When it says to craft board policy, what board?
A board, I think, I think we mean a council bylaws.
Sorry.
I was just, and my only other concern with this, and Betsy, don't take this personally, but when we're crafting policy for the borough council, should the mayor as the executive branch be involved in that, or should there be a separation of powers? That the council be the members creating their own policy?
Their own bylaws.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be the mayor by herself. I think there needs to be, at least we can have 3 members of council on it without it being a quorum. And do it that way.
But you don't see an issue with the mayor being involved?
I don't see
in
an
the
issue with the
process?
mayor being involved in that because there's gonna be.
If you have 3 members and the mayor.
And
that would be-
that's
Oh,
all.
that's.
Yeah.
No, I meant-
I guess my question
I
is,
meant
should
members
it,
including the
should
mayor.
it
Oh,
be
sorry.
3 council?
I understood that, because
Yeah,
obviously
sorry.
3 plus 1 would be 4.
Yeah.
I can do math still,
Yeah.
it's like amazing.
At this hour, very good.
So since the mayor presides over the meeting, I would think that the mayor should be involved in some of
Yes.
the policy, and the
The
mayor
mayor
also
sort of-
by statute is responsible, say, for like communications, official communications and stuff, and that's one of the things that's gonna be included
My skin is so
within.
dry.
So what-
The bylaws will have to be adopted by the council as a whole as well.
And so the policy would then affect also the mayor, it's not just borough council, because this is
Right,
saying
it would be
council.
mayor and
Oh, right.
council.
Mayor and council.
All right.
Yeah.
You know, regardless if the mayor is on it, I think that the mayor has a role because the mayor will present concerns to be addressed, just as any member would. I share your question in terms of
Would you be more
separation of powers.
comfortable if we amended the resolution to say establishing an advisory committee to craft bylaws for the governing body of
Yeah.
Borough of Flemington?
Does that mean
That
it would be 3
includes
council
council
members?
and mayor.
No, it'd be,
The governing body would be the mayor and council.
I guess
So
my
you
question would be to
do you
Chris,
need me
because
to
that doesn't
withdraw
address this
my
question.
motion?
no, I'm not sure that it's necessary, and I think that I should be part of that decision and part of that crafting of policy, because part of that policy will be impacting things that the mayor does as well, that is not council stuff.
So do I need to withdraw my motion?
I think the motion is.
We can amend it with,
I think the
with the
motion's
motion.
still good the way it's.
Okay.
Just changing the words to governing body.
Yeah, governing body and bylaws instead of board policy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Anything else?
Does that need to be changed in the resolution itself anywhere, or? I
We will
haven't
need
looked
to
at-
amend.
I don't think you even need
Or
to
is-
amend it, I don't think you even need to make a motion for that minor
Because it's not a
change.
substantive change?
Yeah, it's not a substantive change, really, I would look at those as
That is.
It's clarifying what
Yeah.
we intend to do here, which is bylaws for the higher governing body.
Where does it say that? Because I'm looking in terms of scope of work.
Wear these braces for 50 years.
Just research and write board policy, right, the second paragraph.
I don't understand your question.
It's saying we're writing a board policy that will be adopted by a majority of this council, but a board policy on what? That's what I'm asking. I understand because we're discussing it, but does it specify in the scope here?
So we don't have any board policy at this point, so it's gonna be an overall.
Years.
And the committee we'll put it together. And then council will vote and probably make other changes, and I would encourage you to reach out to the members of the
I
committee.
do feel like this is almost just a typo. It should say governing body policy, not board. Did we take this resolution perhaps
This
from
has been there all
somebody
day.
No, Sally was just trying to figure out how to word this for the paragraph, so that's what this
Because
is.
you also see these as planning boards.
And then paragraph 4,
Wait, I'm sorry. Can we start with, it's establishing an advisory committee to
craft,
craft
instead of
bylaws?
board,
Yes.
But I just didn't have them all day.
Okay,
and I
bylaws.
cut this.
For the governing body of the borough.
I just put these on at 7:30
Okay,
tonight.
and then paragraph 2, you were saying? What?
Because it says board policy there as well,
And right,
so replacing that with bylaws as well.
okay.
Do we need to say what the scope of those bylaws are? Because obviously.
I don't know that we know the scope yet.
Yeah, I don't know, I think it's going to be a process to decide. I think there are things that are in all model ones, because I think the model bylaws are gonna see
This goes in way too much.
probably 10 years old and don't take into account technology and things like that, so I think it's gonna be.
I imagine we'd reach out to the municipalities and find out who's recently done this.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so if any of these policies we adopt aren't followed, is there gonna be penalties? I mean, how do you enforce?
Have you read through this movie?
No.
Because they're policies, the people get to decide whether you're on the governing body or not on the governing body, so there's no, if you violate the bylaws, they can pass a resolution of no confidence or something like that in you, but it's the people that decide whether you're here or not the rest of the council.
And I think as a relatively young council, I would have appreciated a little bit more guidance. Like, I feel like this would have been a really helpful document for, coming
And this
in
is
as a newer
taking-
person.
You guys have existing policies already that you're carrying out, this is sort of, it's not reinventing the wheel, it's taking
Yeah,
Missouri out there,
absolutely.
putting them in one consolidated area to refer to easily.
Yes.
Any comments, questions, Sally?
Okay. Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Michael?
Okay, and so I'm going to just pass out the resolution.
I'm gonna move it.
So the first question would be,
Do we have to amend it?
is there will to amend the
And that's something
agenda?
we'll address in the bylaws, because the law doesn't require you to make a motion to amend the agenda, but it's advisable.
We got enough for Sally as well. Thank you for doing that. So I'm sorry, Terry, you're saying it's not necessary to?
It's not necessary, but I advise you just
Yeah,
to do it.
that's what we've done in the past.
Yeah.
So if the council will entertain amending,
Did you see
the
the trees
agenda
in
to
front
include
of
this.
the Red Creo? Aren't they all?
I'll make the motion as their second.
I never does anything about it.
I'll second it.
I took the whole piece down.
So is this in the interim until we adopt policies?
I didn't know.
That's how I intended it. It was my presenting this that brought forward the idea of the board policy review. Last year, that was also discussed, I think going in narrower scope. And there were challenges and it didn't happen. I'd like to see this happen. In the interim, I'm offering this resolution. Again, very narrow in scope.
Can I ask the question?
Please do.
The archive concerns me. I don't know how you mean I'm supposed to archive stuff.
And it doesn't say, what does recording mean? We're already recording. We have video,
Right?
we have audio,
Mhm.
that Sally's doing.
It's published on YouTube currently, and YouTube archives it for us, so it's,
Yeah, and
We want to do this.
I download it to thumb drives once a month.
The council passed a resolution or a year or two ago
Yeah.
that we would hold on to recordings longer than like 80 days they're required by the state. So we expanded that to 2 years, that we're holding on to the thumb drives of the meetings and all that stuff.
And probably longer, because thumb drives are pretty inexpensive.
Well, that's okay, fine. I'm not sure.
How many things on
If we're
YouTube
talking
would be
about
there?
archiving this forever or what, you know?
Shall we put the 2 years?
Huh?
Shall we put the 2 years, which is?
We
what we're
take
saying
a
is
vote,
here?
come on a
We'll
second.
see if people even want it.
You made a motion to amend the agenda.
Mhm.
So we should do that before we get into discussion on it.
All right, so call the vote on that, okay. Ms. Giles McCormick?
No.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
No.
Okay, so we've amended the agenda to include this resolution now.
So Sally, you said,
Oh, let's make let's take a motion and a second, and then we'll do the discussion.
To actually introduce it.
Well, motion to adopt it?
oh, so I'm sorry, so we
Motion
just
to have
moved to
it
put it
adopted.
on the agenda.
Yeah.
Now we need a motion to move it.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
All right. Now you can discuss it.
So, you don't clarify how you're gonna record. What happens if there's a technology breakdown? I mean, you've sat next to me, you see sometimes it doesn't go up there. I've then
Sure have.
upload, but, what's a meeting?
Mhm.
There's a whole lot of ambiguity in this.
Yeah, I don't understand what this does, what this adds to our current operations in the meantime. I understand that you mean it as a interim until we were able to take a larger look and come back with some policies, recommendations, but I don't understand what this achieves.
And I thought Sally said that we already do this.
Yeah.
We already have a resolution
Yeah,
for this.
it's redundant. Well, the resolution
No.
technically expired at the end of 2018.
Oh, okay.
But we're keeping it for 2 years, and we do record our
Mhm.
public meetings
Mhm.
2 ways. So I'm not quite sure
Audio
what
and
what this
video.
adds.
Yeah.
So it's in the publication, and the question now is for archive.
I just wasn't sure how long you were
I think
talking
these are
about
great
archiving
questions.
it for.
If you recall, when we looked at the establishing advisory committee to craft bylaws for governing body of borough council, I was asking what is the scope? So I welcome these questions, and I think that for something so narrow, we should be able to come to an agreement for this, because obviously the goal we all want, and that would be to have transparency. So for me, a public meeting would be a meeting scheduled by this council that is to be open to the public, the portion that is to be open to the public would be recorded.
So like the budget meetings too?
I asked for
I
budget
don't
meetings.
think budget meetings are meetings. We don't have any, Sally, they're keeping minutes.
We've certainly recorded them the past 2 years.
No.
No, we recorded them last year, they were never uploaded. And I'll give a great
True.
example. So the other day, when we had the police department in here talking about their budget, there were some public safety concerns, and I don't think we want on audio, video or audio tape when they're talking about operational issues within that department.
So then the issue then would be publication of something that would be of a public safety nature?
I don't know.
And that is just because we did record it
Because,
from the year prior.
because you know, recently made a big hullabaloo over Sally you thought wasn't gonna be at an executive session, and that this is required for the meeting to be legal, and now are we gonna be asking Sally to come to the budget meetings?
If that is going to be required for a public meeting, and it's something that we're going to make known, and we've also done so in the past. In past, we've.
Sally, have you ever gone?
No.
We recorded
I went
it last
to-
year, It just became really clear that it wasn't necessary, Michael, after watching the process last year for the last 2 years. Yeah, we recorded it, but it wasn't, they weren't streamed live, it wasn't necessary. And these are very informal discussions that we're having with all of us sitting around the table down there talking about how to balance a budget for this borough. And if anybody wants to come to these meetings, they can come.
And I believe what was stated in 2019 also was if anyone had any interest in these, copies would be made available. Is that no longer the case?
I don't remember making that statement, thank you.
Okay, let's just, you know what, I think what we'll do, we should make the 2019 meeting recordings available to anyone on council who has interest. Should be available to the public as well, for that matter. Unless
They
we're
are,
saying- unless we're
over
saying-
them.
They are.
Okay, so then, we will
We have
record
them
it,
on site.
but it would be open.
Well, you're
Just
talking
like
about
any
last
other
year.
document.
You're talking about last year, right? You're
Last
talking
year.
about 2019.
So this year, the
which-
decision's been made for it not to be done.
Anybody can request minutes from the
And anybody, you can
meetings,
come in and
or-
record the meeting yourself.
I get Oprah requests all the time for stuff like that.
I'm sorry,
I get Oprah requests all the time for copies of minutes or, you know, when we had lawsuits against us, I have to produce all the recordings of the different meetings.
But what about in the issue of the recording of the budget meeting? We had one resident who was asked for it this evening if it was recorded.
I'm sure that was an amazing coincidence.
I don't know about the budget meetings. I went to one budget meeting and everybody dropped on the floor when I showed up.
But I have a question, are they actual meetings or are they just workshops?
They're workshops.
A workshop is a different animal than a meeting.
So we want to make the distinction between a workshop and a public portion of meetings.
So I think that there's enough, since this was not something that has been fleshed out, since this is something we are appointing a policy for, we have enough different questions to, I think we should table this and
Are you
include it
making a motion
into,
to
yes, I will
table?
move to table
Don't we
and
have to
include it.
withdraw the other motions? Didn't we already move this?
No, I don't think you have to, you can move to table it, right?
You can move to table in the middle, it's a, we went over this, I forget what you call it, it's a motion you can make within a motion, it has a name, and I can't remember what
It
it's
removes the
called.
mechanics.
last slide.
Taryn, I believe it removes the mechanics of people withdrawing their motion and
Thank God I'm not taking
That's
this
fine.
test.
That's fine, and I appreciate the discussion.
Look, I should have read it over.
And do you mind that if this gets tabled, I think I may have a few comments for clarity on it,
Great.
if I provide those?
Yeah, and then I think that would serve in terms of this council review. We can inform that. If there's something that you want to put to us in your monthly packet for that, that's great. I'm glad to have had the opportunity to review this.
So then are we
So
gonna,
has somebody made a motion to table this?
I made a motion to table.
I'll second.
Okay, we're voting on tabling this. Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Han?
Yes.
Mr. Paris?
I'll abstain because I offered it out.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you. That brings us, to our second public comment session. 3 minutes each, please. And it's getting late. Anyone? Lois?
I haven't been here in a couple meetings, so I think I should get 9 minutes.
No. No. But nice try.
Lois Stewart, Flemington.
Okay.
I would like to bring to your attention that the 50th anniversary of Earth Day is this April, and I would like to have this borough do something of some magnitude. So get your thinking hats on, get your, what are you pointing at?
Waiting to Robin.
Oh.
I love Earth Day.
I'm asking the borough.
Are you taking, are you offering to volunteer to put that together?
No, I'm not. But I do think that you have people that are on shade trees and environmental commissions and what have you. And I just think that they need to do something cooperatively between the environmental commission and the shade tree commission and do something, you know, get some trees planted.
Mr. Harris is on both.
His memory leaves, and I'll bring that. I
But
knew
you
that was
can get,
coming.
there's a New Jersey tree, something or other, they might give you some free
We are
trees.
getting a slip of the 50-year, whatever tree
Yeah,
it is.
the sycamore tree or whatever.
There's some
it is.
famous tree in New Jersey that they're sending like
I don't know, but
shoots.
don't use my 3 minutes, please.
Give her another minute.
What departments are coming in tomorrow night for the budget?
I believe it's HPC and library.
What is it?
Historic Preservation Commission and the library that I know of.
They're the only two?
I think that's it. And
It was an overflow week. There wasn't
Yeah.
anything scheduled, it was just
Oh,
if needed.
the big guns have already been here.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to ask also about, what are the benefits of center designation? Sometime earlier, we're talking about center designation. What are the benefits that accrue to this borough because of that?
That frees up a lot of state resources like GIS mapping that we can get for free, and it gives us direct access to a lot of really smart people. And hopefully money, grants.
And what are the detriments?
I can't think of any.
We don't have to abide by anybody else's decisions or recommendations.
No, they're always recommendations.
Okay, I would like to ask, what's being thought of for the south side of Route 12 over by the...
So in the master plan, 2015 master plan examination, they recommended that the south side of Route 12 be rezoned to get an overlay to allow for multi-use residential and more retail. And this is right out of the master plan 2015, and there is over at the Bemis, they're looking to do a mixed-use development there.
What would the height be there?
It's, the maximum height is in the ordinance, I'm sorry, I don't really know what it is.
I can give you a copy of it.
I think it was like 57 feet, which is lower than the Union Hotel is.
Okay, and then,
You can start another minute, we were
I
interrupted.
wanted to ask about, you said on the 25th of March, you're gonna have a meeting about the Agway Mill site?
Yeah.
And what are those people going to suggest, Betsy?
I
I mean, I know it was approved for.
Yeah, no, it's mixed use, and they're working with the hospital, part of it, as of the last discussion, part of it was condoized, part of it is workforce housing, with people, it's above like what would be a COA portable, teachers and nurses.
Condos are bought, though. no?
Condos are purchased, yeah.
That would be a nice change.
Yeah, and I'm pushing real hard that the mixed part of that mixed use be an in-town grocery store, because that end of town has some real transportation challenges.
And that site certainly would be big enough for a grocery store.
It would be a small in town, it wouldn't be a ShopRite.
Oh.
Churches.
No, it wouldn't be. Not enough parking for a church.
Hopefully.
No support to Chris.
Yeah, just something small in town. That's not a bodega, that's a little more.
Oh, and by the way, Joanne just brought to my attention that I brought up about the trees in front of the Red Crab or whatever it is that we're gonna get over there. And Joanne just informed me that the trees in the back parking lot have been removed. Well, now you can't just have somebody come in and,
Yeah, so I'll go and take a look, and I can have Mr. Fine look at it in conformance with the with their site plan approval from whatever many
well,
years
they have
ago that was.
they have to follow the other site plan unless
Yeah.
they come in, right? So,
Yeah, I'll have Jeff take a look at that. I wasn't aware of it.
it's time that, the town
Yeah.
stick up for what's right for us.
So, yes, and to bring up also on the Earth Day thing, so we will be getting a seedling from the DEP from that big tree in Salem County or wherever it was that fell down, and they've started seedlings. I've sent a note, I sent it probably to Councilman Harris, I may have included Councilman Runyon, as well as our DPW to find a home for that, and to figure out how to plant it and make it grow and not get
Would it
eaten
be
by
in
one of our
Tuckamerca?
four-legged creatures in town.
Tuckamercan Park, perhaps?
So, possibly, there might be better areas for it, I don't know yet,
Well, if it's a big, big tree.
yeah.
Buckaroo Park's gonna need work.
Yeah, there's, one of the things, Lois, is, so, the areas in need of redevelopment, like with the Agway, with the global ag side on the thing, one of the things we threw out there as we're talking about the RDA with them is to, what kind of public benefit we can include in there, and part of that is what has been park renovations. So I almost hate to take that tree, which is gonna be real special, and put it in a park that needs a lot of work. Unless it
Well,
can be moved later on.
I would hope when you're talking
Am I
about,
supposed to be timing this
Yeah,
still?
so, I know, sorry.
You got your 9 minutes.
Hey, you're not, there you go.
don't tell anybody.
Ms. Brown.
Okay, Joanne Braun, Flemington, can I just humor me? Because you just mentioned earlier about there's no Friends of Lamberville, blah, blah, blah. Well, I just want to show you a picture of a recent Lamberville council meeting.
I saw that.
So there might be spawning off a Friends of Lamberville.
I saw that. I mentioned briefly about, that may change with the new borough hall city hall that they're talking
They
about.
don't want
That's a lot of people smushed in a room.
That is a lot of people.
So,
Yeah.
all it takes is one of them
It's
to
a lot of
spark,
tax
it.
dollars too.
Anyway, that's all. I just
Anyone else? Okay.
Want to, I think Councilman Merritt had
Okay.
another agenda item.
An agenda item.
Agenda
It was a response before, so the statement was that I was to provide an address as the audio, video clarified. It was to provide the contact, providing contact to the DCA to our mayor immediately at the meeting in November that was discussed. We discussed at that point that there had been back channels of discussions with DCA prior to that, so I'll maintain that they've said that they need this letter that says that we want this. Why not just send our last resolution that was signed by the mayor?
So when I inquired about that contact and that letter to you in email in January, why did you not forward that to me?
Because I provided you the exact same contact information I gave to the mayor.
You gave me a phone number.
Which is the telephone numbers I said I would. When we don't want to do something, we can come up with reasons why not to.
Do we have an attorney? Are you done?
I certainly.
Okay. Do we have an attorney's report?
You pretty much talked about everything that's on my report.
Okay.
I will be, I'm trying to go paperless somewhat for your meetings. At the next meeting, I will have an actual little tablet
Okay.
so I'm not just here like shopping on my phone. I was actually looking at these 208 pages of the items in your agenda. But for the next, I guess my sort of to-do list item that I have for the next meeting, we're gonna have to do an ordinance officially for the sale of 144 Main Street. It's just, we have to go through the motions of what's in the laws. You have to sell property by ordinance, and we will work on the resolution about recording of meetings. Am I missing any to-do items?
Thank you.
Give me a motion to pay some bills.
I'd like to.
Did you, wait, Chris, did you move?
Second.
Okay.
So we're good. Jeremy and Chris.
And Michael,
Okay.
didn't you want to remember something?
Yeah, so there's one bill that was brought to my attention in email this afternoon from Jersey Central Power and Light related to holiday lights. I'm going to pass this down just so Sarah can know exactly which one it is. Reference it as necessary so we can vote to pay all others. That is if council agrees that we.
So
can
why are we
hold that.
withholding this?
Was that on the list?
That, I believe it's on the list, I want to confirm. I just received it
Hey,
this
Bill?
afternoon.
Yes.
So I want to bring it to your attention, it's not due until March
Yeah,
20th.
answer the list. Make sure it's on the list before we start taking it up. Hey, Bill? I think you'll.
He went home.
You
I
left?
actually do think you
Bill?
Hey,
You left.
thank you, sir.
And you suddenly figures JCP and L bill and the amount of, is it even on the list?
Was it $5,000?
Yeah, like,
3,000.
you Christmas lights with LEDs will cut that price right down.
Yeah, somebody else says, there's another bills list that Sally's missing. Signature page.
And Michael has it.
I signed the other one and passed it down. That was-
Yes,
Yeah,
that
but
one
there's
she has
two,
that.
too.
So this is
There's
the
two.
24th.
Yes,
That's today.
All right.
so she needs that one.
So I'm not seeing that, I see it's.
Okay, so there's no reason
Three other
to,
bills, but not.
Great, if that's not in there, then we're good. I'll have an answer for next bill back.
All right, so we have a
A vote.
motion pending. We have,
you wanna withdraw that? Remove them?
Yeah, it's not included, so,
he was just asking about it.
yeah, I just want to
so-
confirm it wasn't in there.
So, Jeremy moved and Chris seconded that we pay the bills. Ms. Giles McCormick?
Yes.
Ms. Hand?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Long?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Ms. Tilly?
Yes.
All right.
Bill, is there any way that you can flag that, so this way it doesn't get on the auto pay list until Michael confirms whatever he needs?
Yeah, I'll talk
information he
to
needs?
Rebecca and Allison to make sure.
Okay.
Good, I'll include you in my response to it. Thank you.
10:50 this evening, and Monday, February 24th, this meeting is adjourned.
All right.